What if the crown you wore tightened with every laugh? What if humor was a weapon and your wits, the sharpest knives in the court? To be a jester for a mad king is to dance on the razor's edge of sanity, where every quip could spark a frenzy, and every punchline could sever your head from your shoulders quicker than a flick of the wrist. In a kingdom where the moon flickers like a dying candle and shadows breathe whispers of treachery, the jester walks a tightrope strung between madness and mortality. One moment you're the king's favorite, crowned in bells, draped in colors that scream joy, but the next, you're the target of a deranged ruler's capricious whim. The king's laughter can ice your veins or warm them with promise, but trust that the latter is a fleeting mirage. Close your eyes. Can you hear the echo of madness in that laughter? Can you taste the bitter tang of danger in every jest? The mad king finds solace in chaos, a symphony of disarray where the jester is both maestro and marionette. This isn't just a job, it's a perilous game of survival, a high-stakes poker match where the currency is your very existence. Dare you jest about the king's thinning hair? One too many jibes, and his temper could slice through the air like a sharpened blade. What about his beloved mistress? The queen? A mere chuckle could herald your doom, a death sentence wrapped in laughter. Welcome to the world where humor molds into absurdity, and the absurd transforms into tragedy. Every performance is a gamble, a wild roll of the dice. The court is a tempest, where servants scurry under the weight of secrets, and rivalries bubble just beneath the surface, ready to erupt. Betrayal is the court's favorite jester, and loyalty? It's a fool's illusion. Spies lurk behind every tapestry, listening for laughter that's just too loud, too sharp, too real. Picture this, a banquet hall filled with gluttonous laughter, flagons overflowing, while the king's eyes glimmer with madness. You stand at the center, a jester's cap atop your head, your heart pounding like war drums. One misstep, one word out of place, and the laughter turns to bloodlust. You think you can charm the madness, dance around it, but it's a fickle beast. It doesn't play fair. It hooks its claws into your soul, dragging you deeper into its sinister embrace. The more you juggle laughter, the more precarious your position becomes, with your head teetering on the brink of the executioner's block. Why would you want to be the jester in a mad king's court? Because you crave the thrill? Because you relish the danger? Or perhaps you're drawn by the intoxicating allure of chaos? Here lies the truth, the jester's fate is a stark reminder, humor is a double-edged sword, and in this realm of madness, you may just find that laughter is the ultimate death knell. The jester's laughter sliced through the tension like a blade, a cruel sharpness that echoed in the stone hallways of the castle. The air was heavy, thick with unspoken words and the scent of damp stone. A flickering torch cast shadows that danced like phantoms on the cold, unforgiving walls. In this moment, the jester stood at the center of a storm, a whirlwind of chaos, secrets, and a desperate yearning for truth amidst the pageantry of power. I remember the glimmer in his eyes, a spark of rebellion smoldering beneath layers of colorful fabric. It was a mask, a vibrant disguise that hid a heart that beat wildly beneath the weight of expectation. His name was Gaius, but they called him Fool, a title that dripped with condescension yet held a deceptive power. In this kingdom ruled by fear and whim, Gaius was the only one brave enough to speak the unspeakable, to wear the fool's cap and tell the king, in riddles and verse, what others dared not. But oh, how precarious was the line he walked. Just beyond the threshold of laughter lay the gallows, and he knew it well. There was a time when they had laughed together, the king and his jester, sharing secrets under the stars. Now, the king's smile was a rictus, a mask of sorrow and madness. King Richard had once been a paragon of strength, crowned in glory, now reduced to a shadow of his former self, haunted by the ghosts of his decisions and the weight of a kingdom crumbling around him. And there was Elara, the lady-in-waiting, whose heart was a battlefield of conflicting desires. She watched from the shadows, her soul screaming for freedom as she navigated the treacherous waters of courtly life. Elara was drawn to Gaius, captivated by the wildness in his eyes, the way he danced on the edge of disaster, but fear bound her to her station. She had witnessed too much political intrigue that dripped like poison, betrayal that could turn lovers into enemies in a heartbeat. In the quiet moments when the echoes of laughter faded, Gaius would catch her gaze, and the world around them would dissolve into a swirling miasma of longing, a heartbeat away from despair. Why do you hide behind that mask? Ilara would whisper, her voice barely a breath, as if the walls themselves were listening. Because, my lady, in this world, it's better to be a fool than a ghost, he would reply, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But the truth was more complicated than riddles and jests. Gaius carried the burden of truth, a truth that could shatter the very foundation of the court. He had seen the king's darkness, the madness that threatened to consume him, and he felt the weight of the crown pressing down on his spirit. Each jest was a knife's edge, each laugh a shield against the despair that threatened to envelop him. It was a delicate dance, this role of the jester, where he balanced on the precipice of life and death, the court's entertainment and its conscience. Each performance was a tightrope walk, a high-wire act of words and wit. He could make them laugh, distract them from their fears, but in that laughter lay a desperation, a plea for hope amidst the encroaching shadows. As the king's paranoia grew, so did the stakes. Whispers of rebellion seeped into the halls like fog, creeping under doors and through cracks, a miasma that filled the air. Gaius felt the tension tighten like a noose around his neck, and with every jest, he risked exposure. The laughter of the court became a haunting melody, a dirge for lost sanity. Ilara's heart raced as the air crackled with unspoken words. She watched Gaius tread the dangerous line, his jests growing bolder, daring the king to confront his demons. The crown, my lord, is a heavy burden, he had said one evening, his voice playful yet laced with steel. Perhaps it would sit better on the head of a goat. The laughter that erupted was hollow, a fragile mask hiding the tension that crackled just beneath the surface. She could see it in the king's eyes, the flicker of rage that threatened to erupt. And in that moment, she felt the weight of the world resting on her shoulders, the cries of her own heart muffled by the cacophony of the court. The confrontation came like a storm, sudden and relentless. Accusations flew, tempers flared, and the laughter turned to a sinister silence. In that fraught moment, Gaius faced the king. The court held its breath, a collective gasp hanging in the air as tension seared through the crowd. You think you're safe behind your jests, fool, the king spat, his voice a low growl. But truth is a dangerous game. I know, my lord, Gaius replied, his voice steady, but sometimes, the greatest truth is hidden in laughter. Would you rather face a fool or a tyrant? In that instant, the jester's words hung heavy, a fragile thread holding the kingdom's fate. Ilara's heart raced as she felt the pulse of the room, the collective anxiety woven into the very fabric of their existence. Would the jester's courage save them or seal their doom? Time itself seemed to slow, each heartbeat resonating within her like thunder. The shadows flickered, and in that moment, she understood the role of the jester, a bearer of truth wrapped in absurdity, a voice for the voiceless, a mirror reflecting the darkest corners of the human soul. In this world of masks and mirth, where laughter masked pain and joy danced with despair, the jester stood as both savior and sacrifice. She realized, with a jolt of terror, that his fate was intertwined with hers, a thread woven tight in the tapestry of their lives. And as Gaius faced the wrath of the king, Ilara felt the weight of her own silence pressing down upon her, a decision looming like a storm on the horizon. The echoes of laughter faded, replaced by the chilling silence that held its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash between madness and truth. The jester's role was not merely to entertain, it was to illuminate the darkness, to remind them all that within the heart of despair, there lay a flicker of hope, a chance to reclaim their humanity amidst the absurdity of existence. In the cold embrace of the castle, as the world outside fell silent, the jester stood tall, an unyielding figure against the tide of chaos, a beacon beckoning them toward the fragile light of understanding. The line between jest and tragedy blurred, and in that moment, nothing was certain, nothing was safe, but everything was alive, pulsing with raw emotion, thick with the promise of what was yet to come. The court was suffocating. The air thick with tension, a palpable silence that hung like a noose above the gathered nobles. A flickering torch cast shadows against the stone walls, where whispers of old betrayals and unspoken fears lingered. The king sat on his throne, his brow knit with worry, the weight of his crown pressing down like lead. A hush fell, as if the universe itself paused, each breath suspended in that cold chamber. And then, the doors burst open. Laughter spilled forth, a strange, manic sound that sliced through the silence. It was the fool, Jasper, his motley garb a riot of color against the drabness of the court. A bold grin stretched across his painted face, wild eyes dancing with mischief and a hint of madness. He clutched a rusty lute, its strings tuned to a haunting melody that wrapped around the tension like a serpent, squeezing tighter, choking the fear. I remember how the nobles recoiled, their expressions a mixture of disdain and curiosity. They hated him and adored him, this jester whose very existence was a paradox, a mirror held to their follies and failures. I remember the way his laughter echoed off the walls, a sound so eerie it sent shivers down my spine, yet I felt compelled to listen, to lean in closer. In a world where power was everything, Jasper was a ghost, a shadow on the edges of the royal feast, forever dancing between the lines of jest and truth. His laughter mingled with the court's tension, a strange alchemy that turned fear into something almost tangible. He was the keeper of secrets, the one who dared to speak what others dared not even whisper. "Ah, my lords and ladies," he sang, his voice a sweet poison. "What's a king without a little jest? A throne without folly is like a feast without wine, dry and dreadfully dull." He strummed the lute, plucking at heartstrings while tugging at their sanity. But beneath the humor lay pain. Each joke was a dagger, a glimpse into the void that threatened to swallow him whole. Jasper knew the fine line he walked, the lethal dance of courtly life. One misstep could send him tumbling into the abyss of disgrace. Each chuckle from the king was a fragile lifeline, but each sneer from a rival was a reminder of his fragile existence, a thread hanging by a mere whisper. Then there was Lady Eleanor, the queen, a woman torn between love and duty, her heart a battleground where loyalty clashed with desire. Her gaze lingered on the jester, a mixture of admiration and pity. She saw the fool's vibrant spirit flicker like a candle in the wind, and it sparked something deep within her, a longing for freedom, a yearning to break the chains of expectation that bound her to the throne. "Why do you laugh, fool?" she asked one day, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the very act of questioning could summon judgment. "Do you not fear the fate of those who mock the crown?" Jasper's laughter faltered, a shadow crossing his painted face. "Fear? My lady, fear is the currency of the court. I spend it freely, but I am never rich." His eyes flashed, a hint of defiance buried beneath layers of jest. "It's the laughter that keeps me alive. The moment I stop, I become nothing, just another ghost lost in these stone walls." As echoes of his words hung heavy in the air, I could feel the weight of history pressing down upon us. The jester's role was not born merely from whimsy, it was forged in the fires of despair. In ancient courts, fools were more than mere entertainers, they were the guardians of truth, the harbingers of reality cloaked in absurdity. From the days of jesters who spoke wisdom to kings in riddles, to the emotional tightrope of a court filled with treachery and intrigue, the jester had always danced on the edge of oblivion. I remember the stories of those who came before Jasper, of jesters who had their tongues cut out for speaking too boldly, of those who met their end in the dungeons for daring to mock the very fabric of power. The court had teeth, and it bit down hard on the foolish and the brave with equal ferocity. In the shadows lingered Reginald, a once great knight whose ambitions had turned to ash. A man whose loyalty had been betrayed, now reduced to a mere spectator of the jester's antics. He watched with a bitterness that seeped into the very marrow of his bones. Reginald despised Jasper, yet he envied him. The fool dared to dance while he was shackled by the chains of his own making. "There's madness in your laughter, fool," he sneered one evening, venom in his words. "What do you know of sorrow? You flit about like a butterfly while the world burns." Jasper's laughter transformed, twisting into something jagged, like the edge of a broken mirror. "I know sorrow better than you, my lord. It's a friend that never leaves my side. I wear it like a second skin." His gaze pierced through Reginald, and in that moment, it was clear that the jester was both player and prey, the embodiment of a psyche torn apart yet somehow made whole by the absurdity of life. The tension coiled tighter, a noose around all of their hearts as night fell deeper into the court. It was as if the very stones were listening, absorbing their fears, dreams, and regrets. Every jest was a heartbeat, a plea for understanding that echoed through the ages. The court existed as a microcosm of the world outside, where laughter masked despair, and the jester was a paradox, a champion of the truth wrapped in the guise of folly. And I stood, a silent observer, caught in the tempest of emotion swirling around me. I felt the weight of their struggles, their pain, their laughter. I felt the history that bound them, the evolution of the Jester, a role that had transcended time, adapting yet refusing to be silenced. In that moment, I realized the Jester was not just a character, he was the very soul of the court, an essential force that held the fragile threads of humanity together. As the shadows danced and the laughter faded into the night, I could only wonder what lay ahead, what new confrontations awaited them, and how the roles of these flawed characters would continue to evolve in the unending cycle of power, folly, and the desperate search for meaning. The story was far from over. The castle walls trembled under the weight of a storm, shadows dancing like phantoms in the flickering torchlight. Thunder rumbled ominously, a growl that echoed through the chambers, setting teeth on edge. And there, at the edge of a vast, empty throne room, his throne room, sat the Mad King, a tempest of chaos and brilliance, crowned by a jagged diadem that seemed to cut into his brow. His laughter was a crackling fire, both inviting and terrifying. It filled the air like smoke, suffocating and intoxicating. "I remember the day the world went mad," he whispered, voice dripping with a blend of nostalgia and mania. His eyes, wild and unfocused, darted around the room, as if seeking a foe in the shadows. "I remember when reality warped into something absurd, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. The storm outside roared, drowning out the cries of the people below. They were hungry, restless. He could hear their whispers, their prayers for mercy laced with accusations of tyranny. The king found solace in their despair. It fed his madness, like a dark, insatiable hunger. Each heartbeat echoed a truth he tried to ignore: he was losing them all, his people, his sanity. But the echoes of laughter were not just his own. A figure lurked in the shadows, a woman named Elara, her heart a battleground of love and resentment. She had once held the king's hand, a fleeting memory of warmth amidst the coldness that his reign had wrought. Now, she stood there, torn between wanting to save him and the undeniable urge to flee. "You're not him anymore," she whispered, voice trembling as if stepping onto thin ice. "You're lost." He turned, eyes narrowing, slicing through the distance between them like a blade. "Lost?" He laughed again, a sound that cut into her like shards of glass. "I am found. I have seen realms beyond this pathetic world, and you think I'm lost." The truth was a tightrope strung between them. Elara's love flickered like a dying candle, battling the darkness that surrounded her. She remembered the night spent beneath the stars, sharing dreams woven from laughter. But now, those dreams had twisted into nightmares, and she was left holding the weight of what remained, the wreckage of a once great mind, crumbling like the stone of the castle itself. In the far corner, Gabriel, a loyal knight turned reluctant guardian, observed this tragic dance. His heart was a silent symphony of heartache and duty. "You're a ghost haunting this place," he muttered, though he dared not speak those words aloud. He had stood by the king's side through battles, through bloodshed, and now, through madness. But love could not blind him to the truth. Every time he saw the Mad King slip deeper into his delusions, it felt like a blade twisting in his own gut. "I remember," the king continued, his voice softening, almost childlike. "I remember the laughter, the joy." His hands trembled, fingers twitching as if grasping at unseen threads of memory. I can still hear the echoes." "Echoes?" Elara's voice cracked, laced with desperation. "What echoes?" "They're gone." "No." He roared, a tempest of fury breaking through the facade. "They're here. They're always here." He pointed to the shadows, his movements frantic, erratic. "Can't you see? They watch me, they guide me." The sound of thunder crashed, and for a heartbeat, the world around them stilled. The air felt electric, charged with unspoken words that danced like fireflies at dusk. Elara's heart raced, and a shiver crawled up her spine, a whisper of something darker lurking just beyond her grasp. Gabriel stepped forward, the weight of his sword heavy at his side. "You're not a god, my king," he said, voice steady, infused with an unyielding loyalty that battled against fear. "You're flesh and blood, broken flesh, blooded by your own choices." The Mad King's eyes turned to him, a storm brewing anew. Choices, he spat, as if the word were poison. You think I made these choices? The cosmos chose me. I am its vessel. And in that moment, Ilara saw the cracks in his madness, the flicker of the man he used to be. The man who once cared for his people. You are not a vessel, you are a man, she breathed, voice filled with a tender resolve. You can be saved. The storm outside raged on, but inside, a tempest was brewing, tension thick enough to cut. The air crackled with the weight of their truths. The shadows in the room danced closer, coiling around the edges of their confrontation, teasing the very fabric of their emotions, of their past, of their love twisted by despair. I remember, the king began again, voice wavering. I remember the faces of those I've lost. Then remember us. Ilara cried, stepping forward, hands trembling as she reached toward him. Remember who you were before the madness consumed you. But madness has a cruel way of twisting love into chains, and as he raged against the ghosts that tormented him, he found solace only in their suffering. You can't save me, he shouted, despair spilling from his lips like blood from a wound. I am the Mad King, and I will reign over this chaos until the end. His laughter echoed again, a chilling sound that wrapped around them like a noose. Gabriel's heart pounded in his chest, a drumbeat of impending doom. And what will be left of you when the chaos fades? He asked, voice low yet piercing, like a knife through the murk of madness. The king faltered, the laughter fading into a hollow echo. For a moment, the mask slipped, revealing a man ravaged by fear, lost in the depths of his own soul. The storm raged outside, but the true tempest lay inside the fortress of their hearts, fear, love, and madness intertwining in a dance of shadows and echoes, a cycle that may never find resolution. The clock ticked, each second stretching into eternity, a reminder that time was slipping away. The very walls of the castle seemed to breathe with the weight of their emotions, as if the stones themselves were alive, witnesses to the tragedy unfolding. And as the three stood there, caught in the web of despair, hope flickered like a candle in the storm, fragile yet defiant. What would happen next hung in the air, palpable and raw, a moment suspended in time. The only certainty was the chaos, the madness, and the undeniable truth that their lives were forever entwined in this unending spiral of love, loss, and the haunting shadows of a king gone mad. The echoes lingered, a promise of what was yet to unfold, as the storm raged on. The moon hung high, veins of silver slicing through the shroud of night, as shouts erupted from the castle's courtyard. A king's laughter echoed, wild and unchecked, reverberating off stone walls that had witnessed centuries of splendor and decay. I stood frozen, heart pounding like a war drum, watching through a narrow window as the shadows danced around the flickering torches, an unsettling ballet of chaos. Bring me their heads! His voice boomed, punctuated by the crack of a whip, a sound that sliced through the air like a blade. I could almost taste the iron tang of blood as my pulse quickened, an instinctual dread creeping in. Madness had woven itself into his very being, a tapestry of delusion and tyranny. This was King George III, the monarch whose grip on reality had become as fragile as a cobweb in a storm. I couldn't look away, not even when I heard the whispers behind me, he's gone mad. A tyrant, a fool. Each word coiled around my heart, squeezing tighter. I remembered the stories of his youth, how he had once been a beacon of hope and reason, the ruler who dreamt of a united empire. But that was before the shadows fell, before the voices turned from whispers to screams in the silent corners of his mind. Another figure loomed large in my thoughts, a spectral presence that haunted the very halls of this castle, a spectre that wore the crown of madness like a crown of thorns. The infamous King Charles VI of France, known as Charles the Mad, who wandered the woods believing he was made of glass, fearing the slightest touch would shatter him. I could feel the weight of his sorrow, how it coursed through the air like a lament for lost sanity, a chilling reminder of how the mind could betray even the most powerful. Look at him, I thought, as I clutched the window sill, fingers digging into the wood. A king, yet more fragile than the gossamer threads of a spider's web. I could see the glint of madness in George's eyes, an inviting abyss that promised oblivion. And yet, there was something heartbreaking in his laughter, a desperate attempt to drown out the clamor of his own disordered thoughts. I breathed in deeply, feeling the chill of the night seep into my bones, each breath a reminder of the fine line between power and insanity. They wore the crown, yet their reign was fraught with the chaos of their turbulent minds. The throne became their prison, and every decree a frantic grasp at control, slipping like sand through their fingers. George, with his manic energy, and Charles, lost among the trees, were not just mad kings, they were mirrors reflecting the darkest corners of humanity. As the moon bathed the courtyard in eerie light, I watched soldiers approach, faces drawn with fear and uncertainty. They were mere puppets on strings, dancing to the whims of a ruler spiraling into darkness. I could see the way they faltered, the way hope bled from their eyes. Would they be the next victims of a king enchanted by the ghosts of his own mind? And then there was the ghost of King Henry VI, the once beloved monarch who wandered the fields, oblivious to the bloodshed around him, caught in a reverie of his own making. He, too, had been a prisoner of his thoughts, lost in a battlefield of illusions. What is a king, I mused, if not a reflection of the world's chaos? A soldier stumbled, breaking the moment, and I turned my head just in time to catch the flicker of doubt in his eyes, a mirror to the turmoil within. I could feel the tension crackling like static in the air, the weight of impending doom pressing down on us all. The king's madness was a contagion, spreading through the ranks, infecting hearts with fear, igniting whispers of rebellion. What makes a king mad? Is it the weight of the crown, pressing ever heavier, or the loneliness that comes from wearing it? The laughter of George echoed again, raw and feral, and I felt the walls of the castle pulse with his madness, a heartbeat of despair that resonated deep within me. Madness is a cruel mistress, I thought. She lures you in with promises of power, then leaves you to drown in your own delusions. The kings, Marys, and Georges, all were caught in a web of their own making, and I could feel their despair wrapping around me, a chilling embrace that left me breathless. In that moonlit courtyard, time warped, stretching and bending like the minds of those who ruled. Each moment felt like a heartbeat in the darkness, a reminder of the thin veil between sanity and chaos. The world outside remained oblivious to the unraveling within these walls, the whispers of madness and the laughter of tyranny. I stood there, caught in the tide of history, feeling the pain of those kings, knowing that even the most powerful could be lost to the echoes of their own thoughts. I remembered George, Charles, Henry, each a victim of their own crown, each a chapter in the tale of madness that stretched through time like the shadows of the night. The tension swelled around me, a storm brewing, and I dared not blink. The moment felt eternal, a snapshot of a world where power and insanity danced an intricate waltz. The laughter echoed once more, a haunting melody that would reverberate long after the night had swallowed the light. And as I looked out at the chaos unfolding below, I couldn't help but wonder, how many more would fall under the spell of a mad king? How many more shadows would stretch across the land, whispering tales of despair? The questions loomed heavy, an anchor in the dark sea of my thoughts, pulling me further down into the abyss. Madness, I realized, was not just a condition, it was an endless cycle, a haunting refrain that echoed through history, leaving a trail of broken crowns and shattered dreams. The night was alive with tension, the air thick with anticipation, and I felt the pulse of a story that would never truly end. Each heartbeat promised more, a journey into the heart of madness, where every king is both a tyrant and a victim, trapped in their own swirling chaos. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, a darkness pooling in the corners of the dimly lit tavern. Laughter rang out, a brittle sound that shattered like glass, only to fall silent as the door creaked open. In that heartbeat of hesitation, all eyes turned. There he stood, the Jester, a splash of color in a world rendered gray. His motley garments hung loose, a chaotic tapestry of joy and despair. But it was the shadow behind him that cast a pall over the room, a figure draped in sorrow that whispered of stories untold. I remember the way the flickering candlelight danced, illuminating his painted smile, a mask that concealed a heart heavy with abandonment. He was a master of comedy, a puppeteer of laughter, but tonight the strings felt taut, ready to snap. Laughter became a ghostly echo, haunting him, taunting him. He stepped forward, each movement a careful balance on the edge of a precipice, the weight of grief pulling him down, down, down. Across the room, Myra sat, eyes glistening like the shards of a broken mirror. She was a woman of resilience, her laughter a shield forged in the flames of her past, yet here she was, vulnerable, stripped of her armor. I remember the way her fingers trembled as she clutched her drink, a fragile fortress against the tide of memories flooding back. love, loss, the echo of a child's laughter that once filled her home. The jester's gaze met hers, a flicker of recognition sparking between them, a shared understanding of the absurdity of life and the tragedy woven within it. "Why do you wear a smile?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a blade. "Aren't you tired of pretending?" The jester's smile wavered, the humor slipping through his fingers like sand. "Pretending? It's my lifeblood. Without it, what would I be?" He chuckled, but it was hollow, echoing against the wooden beams of the tavern, a ghost of a jest. The truth lay bare in the spaces between their words, the invisible scars of their pasts a testament to the weight of unrelenting grief. The jester was a jester no longer, but a man grappling with the demons of his own creation. Each joke, once a flickering flame, now felt like a candle extinguished too soon, leaving darkness in its wake. And yet, the audience, the drunken masses, clapped and cheered, their exuberance a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within. I remember the faces twisted in mirth, oblivious to the tempest of despair unraveling before them. The laughter felt like a noose tightening around the jester's neck, a reminder that he was trapped in a role that offered neither solace nor escape. Across the room, a newcomer entered, a man cloaked in shadows, each step a thunderous echo against the wooden floor. His presence was magnetic, pulling at the strings of fate, a catalyst for the chaos simmering beneath the surface. The jester's smile faltered even more, the weight of the room shifting as if the air had gained 1,000 pounds. "Do you hear that?" the newcomer asked, his voice smooth as silk but laced with an undercurrent of danger. "It's the sound of a heart breaking." Myra's breath caught in her throat, her heart thrumming a wild rhythm as the tension escalated, plucking at the strings of anxiety. The jester's eyes darted between them, a desperate plea for clarity amidst the shadows. "What do you want?" he stammered, his bravado cracking, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. "Truth," the man replied, his lips curling into a sly grin. "The kind that tastes bitter yet liberating. The kind that shatters illusions." A silence enveloped the room, thick enough to slice. I remember the weight of it, a palpable force pressing against my chest. The audience, entranced by the unfolding drama, was oblivious to the jagged edges of reality creeping closer. The jester took a step back, the laughter of the crowd fading into a distant memory, a haunting reminder of what he had lost. In that moment, the walls of the tavern seemed to pulse, the shadows lengthening, wrapping around the trio like a cold embrace. Myra stood, her heart racing, her past colliding with the present in a cacophony of emotions, fear, longing, regret. "You're not just a clown," she said, her voice trembling, yet resolute. "You're a man. A man who feels everything, just like the rest of us." The jester flinched at her words, the truth stinging like 1,000 needles. He felt exposed, raw, a canvas stripped of paint, revealing the haunting sketches of his existence. "What do you know of my heart?" he shot back, his voice a mixture of defiance and despair. "I wear this mask for a reason. Because it's easier." Myra countered, her eyes blazing with an intensity that cut through the haze. "Easier than facing the darkness within. But that darkness holds the truth, and without it, we're just shadows playing at life." With those words, the room trembled. The jester's facade cracked, laughter morphing into something more profound, a hollow echo that reverberated in the depths of his soul. I remember him standing there, a man caught between the light and the dark, the absurdity of existence weighing heavily on his heart. The newcomer leaned in closer, a smirk dancing on his lips as he whispered, "The world is a stage, my friend, but the play is tragic. Only through embracing the absurd can one truly live." And then, something shifted. The shadows pulsed, a heartbeat, perhaps, a reminder that life was a beautiful mess, filled with moments that intertwined comedy and tragedy. A clock ticked somewhere in the distance, each tick a reminder of time's relentless march forward. The audience, still oblivious, reveled in their ignorance, laughter ringing out as if it could drown out the truth. But beneath the surface, a storm brewed, the jester's toolkit a blend of humor and sorrow, ready to explode. I remember the silence before the storm, the tension thick like fog, each breath a whisper, a promise, a plea. The confrontation loomed, a collision of laughter and tears, of ghosts and dreams. The shadows lengthened, creeping closer, wrapping around them like an embrace, the weight of comedy and tragedy hanging in the balance. With the world holding its breath, the Jester stood on the precipice of revelation, ready to leap into the abyss where laughter mingled with tears. And as he prepared to speak, the truth slipped through his painted lips, a bittersweet melody that would reverberate through the ages, echoing in the hearts of all who dared to listen. The stage was set, the players ready, the tale of laughter and sorrow woven tightly together, as the clock ticked on, a relentless reminder of life's beautiful absurdity. Thunder rumbled, low and ominous, across the mud-slicked paths of the village. In that moment, when the air thickened with dread and the heavens seemed poised to unleash their fury, the Jester stood alone, drenched in the cold rain, his motley colors muted and bleeding into one another. He was the storm's herald and its victim, a tragic clown caught in the fray of a world that spun on the axis of laughter and despair. I remember how his painted smile cracked, fissures like lightning strikes across his face. There he was, a chaotic symphony of colors, his bells jangled a nervous tune. The villagers gathered, shoulders huddled together, eyes wide with fear and a hint of morbid curiosity. Was he mad or merely a harbinger? What wisdom lay hidden beneath the shrouded layers of his humor, a truth both profound and terrifying? The Jester, let's call him Roderick, wielded humor like a sword, sharp and jagged. He danced between the lines of comedy and tragedy with a grace that was both mesmerizing and unsettling. On one hand, his jests were a balm, a fleeting reprieve from the grim realities of a world plagued by disease and death. Fear not the reaper, for he only harvests the ripe, he'd cackle, though the laughter that followed was often tinged with uneasy gasps. But wit, I learned that day, is a dangerous game. Just as laughter can mend broken spirits, it can also carve deep wounds, leaving scars that would never fade. Roderick would mock the town's failures, their superstitions, their fears. With every jest, he navigated treacherous waters, buoyed by the weight of truth and consequence. He turned to the lord of the manor, a man as rotund as his greed, and jest, "Your wealth is a grave, my lord, and you are but its corpse." Laughter erupted, but the lord's gaze darkened, a storm brewing behind his eyes. Then there was Elara, a baker's daughter whose laughter rang like chimes on a breezy day. She watched Roderick with a mix of admiration and dread, caught in the pull of his energy, torn between the lure of joy and the shadow of danger. Her heart raced, a pulse in her throat every time he performed, every time he danced on that thin line. She knew his words were blades, cutting close to the bone, yet she felt an undeniable attraction to his madness, to the freedom he embodied. I remember her face, radiant yet troubled, as Roderick spun tales of folly, of kings who wore crowns made of thorns. The higher they rise, he'd say, the harder they fall. Elara wanted to believe in his message, to grasp the hope hidden in his chaos, even as she feared the inevitable backlash. She could sense the tension, the peril in his jests, as Roderick squared off against the very fabric of authority, wielding satire like a torch in the bitter dark. Their fates entwined, a delicate dance of despair and yearning. Elara's laughter mingled with the Jester's words, a haunting melody in the air, and I held my breath, waiting for the moment when joy would turn to tragedy. The townsfolk, eager to escape their mundane lives, were like moths drawn to the flame of his performance, but the fire could burn brightly and consume. I saw them laugh, faces illuminated, but beneath the surface lay a bubbling tension, threatening to erupt. Roderick, caught in the whirlwind of his own making, began to realize that every laugh was a risk, every jest a potential death sentence. He felt the weight of their expectations pressing down like a heavy cloak, his mind racing with the knowledge that humor can be a weapon. With each quip, he chipped away at the fragile structures of power and belief, and he knew it was only a matter of time before the rulers would silence him. The rain intensified, a torrent that washed away the laughter, leaving only uncertainty in its wake. Roderick stood there, soaked to the bone, aware that his tongue was his greatest asset, but also his gravest threat. He met Elara's gaze, a silent conversation dancing between them, her eyes pleading for hope. "Do you see?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the storm. "This laughter, it's both the light and the shadow. I am the truth-teller, but truth can be deadly." Elara felt the weight of his words settle in her chest, an echo of every moment when laughter turned to silence. She saw the danger reflected in the rain-slicked streets, a warning that their dance on the edge could lead to a fall from which they might never recover. The villagers began to murmur, voices rising in agitation, fingers pointing toward the jester, their laughter turning sour like curdled milk. Roderick's heart raced. He was teetering on that precarious precipice where humor became anathema, a dangerous game of survival. He turned to Elara, desperation etched into his features. "Wit can cut deeper than any blade," he said, his breath hitching. "Will you follow me into madness, or shall I face it alone?" Elara, caught between the safety of conformity and the thrill of rebellion, felt her heart pull in two directions. What lay beneath the laughter? A truth that could shatter illusions and reveal the haunting specter of reality? Just as the village reached a boiling point, Roderick summoned the last reserves of his courage. With one final flourish, he crafted a punchline that hung in the air, a fragile thread connecting them all. Yet, even in darkness, a laugh is a light that dances with shadows. The townsfolk erupted, laughter bursting forth like the sun peeking through storm clouds. But the danger loomed, the line drawn starkly between acceptance and condemnation. The jester had danced too close to the fire, the echoes of their laughter faded, leaving behind an uneasy silence. I remember, in that chilling moment, the palpable tension that crackled in the air. The jester's fate was sealed, and the question hung like smoke: would he pay the price for his truths, or would he slip through the fingers of fate into the night, a ghostly figure fading into the shadows? And as rain dripped from his chin, that haunting thought lingered, a whisper that echoed through time: laughter, after all, is but a heartbeat away from danger. The air crackled with tension. It was thick, suffocating, and yet exhilarating, a storm brewing beneath the surface of a glittering facade. In the grand hall, adorned with crimson banners and flickering chandeliers, whispers snaked through the crowd, sharp and deceitful as daggers. I stood there, a fly in the web, my heart pounding like a war drum, drowning in the cacophony of laughter that masked the impending doom. I remember the way Lady Elara's eyes glinted under the candlelight, full of secrets and veiled threats. She was beautiful in a way that could draw blood, her lips curved into a smile that seemed to mock the very air around me. I could almost taste the metallic tang of betrayal, thick and coppery. Her laughter rang out, bright and cruel, the kind that sent shivers skittering down my spine. I had seen that look before. It was the same glint I had caught in the mirror, the same reflection that whispered of ambition wrapped in silken lies. Across the hall, Lord Cain leaned against a marble pillar, his expression cloaked in shadows. There was something about the way he shifted, as if the very walls were closing in on him. He was a man of contradictions, his broad shoulders bore the weight of the world, yet his eyes danced with mischief. I could see the flicker of doubt in his gaze, a vulnerability hidden beneath layers of bravado. He was my friend, or so I had thought, but in this labyrinth of court politics, the line between friend and foe blurred until it was indistinguishable. In that moment, the clock struck, each chime echoing like a warning bell. Time was a fickle mistress, and here, in this treacherous landscape, it twisted and turned, gnawing at hope while feeding on ambition. I felt a chill creep up my spine. The game was about to begin. I had always known the stakes were high, but here, within these opulent walls, lives were mere pawns, sacrificed for power. I could almost hear the echo of whispered promises, contracts sealed not with ink but with blood. Elara stepped forward, her movement fluid, as though she glided over the marble floor, and I was rooted in place, anchored by both fear and fascination. "Isn't it a beautiful night?" she asked, her voice like honey dipped in poison. "Stars are merely candles in the dark, and yet, they're so far away." I swallowed hard, the metaphor hanging heavy in the air, chilling me to the bone. It was true, stars twinkled like distant dreams, and here we were, trapped in a nightmare. Cain's eyes darted between us, a flicker of something unspoken simmering beneath the surface. "Do you feel it?" he whispered, drawing me in with a magnetic pull. The tension, like a bowstring pulled taut, ready to snap. He took a step closer, the warmth of his presence a stark contrast to the icy chill creeping into my marrow. I remembered the times we had laughed together, shared secrets under the watchful gaze of the moon. Those moments felt like fragments of a different lifetime, now overshadowed by the murky depths of our reality. "I remember," I murmured, the words spilling from my lips like a confession. "I remember the laughter, the warmth, before the shadows took over." It was a plea wrapped in nostalgia, a desperate grasp at a fleeting past. But in this court, memories were traded like currency, and I was bankrupt. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted, the air thickening with an unspoken challenge. Ilara's smile morphed, sharp as a blade, as she locked eyes with Cain. "Do you know what I crave, Cain?" she said, her voice smooth, yet laced with danger. "I crave the power to shape our destinies, to turn this treacherous game on its head." Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, a promise of chaos. I could feel the tension crackling between them, an electric charge demanding to be released. Cain's jaw clenched, the very essence of conflict radiating from him. "And what of our friendship, Ilara? Are you willing to sacrifice it for a throne made of shadows?" A heartbeat of silence passed before the laughter erupted again, a cruel mockery of their fragile bond. The court reveled in the drama, feasting on our turmoil as if we were mere performers in a tragic play, and the audience demanded blood. I felt like a ghost, caught in the crossfire of their veiled war. I wanted to scream, to shake them awake from this delusion, but the words lodged in my throat like stones. I was paralyzed, trapped in the ruins of my own indecision, while they danced around their deadly game. The clock struck again, and each chime felt like a countdown echoing through my very soul. "We all play a part, don't we?" Ilara mused, her eyes narrowing as if she could see right through me. "But what happens when the curtain falls? When the audience tires of our little drama?" I shuddered at the thought, the ominous weight of her words settling like a shroud. Cain stepped closer, his voice low and fierce. "I won't let you drown me in your ambition, Ilara. Not while I still breathe." The vulnerability that had once colored his bravado faded, replaced by a fierce determination. I felt my heart race, each beat screaming for resolution, for clarity, but here, in this twisted labyrinth of court politics, clarity was a luxury no one could afford. And then it happened, the pivotal moment I had both dreaded and anticipated. With a flourish, Ilara tossed a challenge into the air, her words sharp enough to cut. "Then let's see whose resolve is truly unbreakable." The gauntlet was thrown, and I stood at the edge, a witness to their duel. In that instant, the world fell silent, the laughter and whispers fading into the background. I was left with a singular truth: the treacherous landscape of court politics was not just a game of power, but a crucible of the soul, where every decision carried the weight of destinies untold. Shadows loomed larger than life, and I found myself at the nexus of their storm, heart racing, breath hitching, caught in the whirlpool of ambition and despair. Time stretched and twisted, moments bleeding into one another, the stakes rising higher with each passing heartbeat. I stood frozen, teetering on the brink, while the world around me twisted into a surreal dance of light and darkness. The battle was coming, and in this treacherous landscape, no one would emerge unscathed. The hall was empty, whispers of laughter echoing like ghosts. I stood there, cloaked in motley, a patchwork of colors that felt more like a shroud than a costume, staring at the throne, a gilded seat that promised power but reeked of betrayal. The king's eyes glinted with a hunger that could swallow whole kingdoms, his smile was a jagged knife hidden beneath silk. And yet, in that moment, I was the most powerful being in the room. A jester, yes, but also a puppet master. I remember Mabel, her laughter, a melody that could charm even the direst of spirits. I remember the way she would toss her head back, loose curls bouncing as if they had a life of their own. It filled me with joy, but that joy was laced with fear. She was the queen's handmaiden, a position of trust, and yet, I saw the shadows lurking in her eyes, the way she flinched when the queen's voice sharpened like glass, the way her smile faded when courtly whispers snaked through the air like serpents. "How far will you go for a laugh?" I whispered to the shadows, knowing they held secrets more dangerous than the king's temper. The court was a game of chess, each pawn hiding daggers behind their backs. Mabel had become a piece I was desperate to protect, yet I knew that in this world, the greatest sacrifices were often the ones that shattered the heart. Then there was the king, a man with a crown too heavy for his fragile head. I remember the day he summoned me, his eyes like flint, igniting a fire of dread in my chest. "Make them laugh," he demanded, the weight of the throne pressing down on him like 1,000 stone weights. But what he wanted was not laughter, it was loyalty. And loyalty, like a noose, tightened with every jest. I remember the night when the palace trembled beneath the echoes of 1,000 secrets. I stood before the court, the nobles, shimmering in silks and furs, their eyes like hungry wolves. "Your Majesty," I began, a spark of bravado dancing on my tongue, "do you know why the jester wears bells? Because every step we take is a reminder of how foolish we are." A ripple of laughter washed over the room, but in the depths of it, I saw the Queen's eyes narrow, beautiful yet calculating, like a spider watching a fly caught in its web. I felt the heat of Mabel's gaze from the corner of the room, but I could not meet it. How could I? I was a fool, after all, a court jester whose life lay balanced on the edge of a razor-sharp jest. The tension in the air thickened with every laugh, every clap that echoed like distant thunder. The nobles were a storm, and I was caught in the whirlwind, spinning faster than the truth could catch me. Mabel's eyes flashed with something unspoken, a desperation that sent chills down my spine. I caught her gaze just once, and the world around us faded. "You must be careful," she mouthed, a silent warning that thundered in my heart. I wanted to shield her, to tell her that the court was a beast, a ravenous creature that would consume anything looking weak, anything that dared to stand in its way. But how could I? I was bound in a dance of madness where laughter was currency and truth a mirage. I could feel the Queen's breath on my neck, her presence a spectre that loomed larger with every jest. "Fool," she had called me once, her voice dripping with disdain. "You hide your wisdom behind a painted smile." But her words had cut deeper than venom, and I had laughed, because that was all I could do. Laughter was the armor I wore, thin but unyielding. And then came the night of the feast, a tapestry woven with brightness and shadows. The king, intoxicated by power and wine, gestured for me to entertain. I stepped forward, the weight of the moment pressing down like a leaden cloak. "Your Majesty," I said, voice light, heart pounding, "what do you call a king who loses his crown?" A beat, a silence hanging thick as fog. "A very lucky man." The air erupted into laughter, but it echoed hollow, a ghost of joy. Yet the Queen's laughter was different, it was a bell tolling, a harbinger of despair. I felt it, the tension crackling like lightning. She would not let this stand, the game was afoot, and the stakes were more than mere laughter. Betrayal was a fevered dream lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to strike. I glanced at Mabel, her face pale under the flickering torchlight, and saw the truth flash in her eyes. She knew. She knew that the game was not about jesting for the king, it was about survival in a world where shadows held the most power. I remembered the stories of old, the ones where jesters became the wisest of all, yet I felt no wisdom, only the weight of impending doom. And then, it happened. The Queen, poised and elegant, rose from her seat. "Enough of this foolishness," she interjected, her voice a cold wind slicing through the laughter. The room fell silent, every eye trained on her, every heart pounding with trepidation. She leaned forward, her gaze pinning me in place, a predator sizing up its prey. "A fool can be useful," she said, and the air turned thick with unspoken threats. I felt Mabel's hand clutch at my sleeve, and in that moment, our fates intertwined, a fragile thread woven in the loom of courtly intrigue. The king's laughter turned to ice, a warning etched in his features as the Queen's power swelled like a tidal wave. What is a king without a jester? A jester without laughter? The court was a cruel stage, and I was both the performer and the audience, trapped in a play that moved toward a tragic climax. The clock on the wall ticked, each second a heartbeat echoing the inevitable conclusion, a sinister countdown that loomed over us like a guillotine ready to fall. I was running out of time, running out of words. In that space, I understood, jokes could be a weapon, laughter could be a shield, but in the end, it was the silence that would drown us all. And as the shadows grew longer and the night deeper, I clenched my fists, preparing to stand against the storm that was about to break. The stage was set, the actors in place, and the finale was looming, a catastrophic collision of power, fear, and unyielding truth. The hall echoed with the hollow sound of laughter, a ghostly ripple that shimmered through the darkness. It was a laughter that could claw at your insides, a cacophony of bleating sheep and shattered dreams. The king sat upon his throne, draped in a tattered cloak that had once been royal purple, now faded to a pathetic shade of twilight. His eyes were wild, darting around the room, searching for a reality that had long since slipped from his grasp. The crown, heavy and crooked on his head, felt like an anchor pulling him into madness. At his feet, a jester danced, a marionette on strings of despair. Clad in mismatched colors, his face painted with a grin too wide for the depths of his soul, he leaped and twirled, an absurd spectacle in a world gone wrong. I could see the way his hands trembled at his sides, how the laughter he forced out felt as sharp as broken glass. He was a mirror reflecting the shattered fragments of a dying kingdom and, somehow, the very essence of the king's madness. "Look at me, dear king. Your shadow is more solid than you." The words rang out, sharp, biting. The jester's voice dripped with a dark humor that clung to the air like the stench of decay. In the back of my mind, I wondered if he was mocking the king or simply trying to keep the darkness at bay. He could have been both. I felt the weight of his gaze, brimming with unshed tears masked by a facade of absurdity. I remember the way the torches flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the stone walls, twisting into grotesque shapes. The court watched, a cluster of barely there figures, their eyes hollow and their expressions a blend of horror and fascination. They were trapped in a game they no longer understood, held captive by the madness that had seeped into the very marrow of their lives. "Tell me, my lord," the jester continued, his voice rising, "does your crown feel heavy, or is it just that your thoughts weigh you down?" Each syllable wrapped around my heart, squeezing tighter as I felt the king's silence settle like lead in the air. The tension was palpable, an electric current that sparked in the space between madness and clarity. I could hear the king's breath, ragged, unsteady, each intake a reminder of his fragile hold on sanity. A flicker of rage sparked in the king's eyes, a tempest swirling beneath the surface. He opened his mouth, ready to unleash a torrent of fury, but the jester's grin widened, like a chasm threatening to swallow us all. "Ah, but what is madness, dear king? Is it not merely a different way of seeing the world? A kaleidoscope of colors for those too blind to witness the gray?" He pirouetted, and I swore I could see a ghost behind him, an echo of the king's past, a memory lost in the labyrinth of time. And then, the moment shattered. The king surged to his feet, the throne creaking beneath him like an old man's bones. "You speak of colors, fool, but my world is drenched in blood. My kingdom, my people, are dancing on the edge of a blade." There was a rawness in his voice that clawed at my insides. A plea wrapped in desperation, wrapped in rage. The jester stepped back, the flicker of fear crossing his painted face momentarily before being swallowed by that all-too-familiar grin. "Ah, my king. The blade is simply another dance. Shall we cut to the quick of it, then?" He bowed dramatically, his cap jingling with every movement, a melody of madness spiraling into the air. It was the absurdity of it all that struck me, the jester, the king, the kingdom teetering on the brink, yet here they were, engaged in a twisted waltz of reality and illusion. I could feel the weight of their despair, their dreams entangled in a web of chaos. The jester, with his broken laughter, wore the king's madness like a second skin, a reflection of the buried fears lurking within the shadows of the throne room. "Do you not see?" he cried, his voice ringing out with a clarity that pierced through the fog. "Your madness is a mirror, my king. It reflects your faults, your fears, your wildest dreams. To face it is to embrace the absurdity of life." Suddenly, the air crackled with tension. I could almost taste the madness, a bitter tang that lingered on my tongue. The king's eyes narrowed, a storm brewing beneath his brow. "You dare speak to me of absurdity? You, who wears the garb of a fool?" His voice was thunder, echoing off the walls, shaking the very foundation of their world. But the jester stepped closer, undeterred, his voice dropping to a whisper that filled the space between them like smoke curling in the dim light. "A fool, yes, but a fool who dances not on the edge of the blade but through the darkness. I am your shadow, dear king. I am the mirror who shows you what you fear to see. What is sanity, after all, but a fragile thread that can snap with a single breath?" With each word, I felt the air shift, an undercurrent of truth that tugged at the seams of the king's reason. The jester's gaze bore into him, unyielding, and for a moment, I thought I could see the king teetering on the precipice of revelation. The madness he held so tightly was slipping through his fingers, like sand in an hourglass, marking time that felt infinite and yet fleeting. And then, the moment hung there, suspended, the silence almost deafening. Fear, love, pain, these emotions tangled like a web, each heartbeat echoing in the hollow chamber. The king's breath quickened, and in that singular second, I understood the truth. The jester was not just a fool, he was a harbinger of reality, a voice in the chaos, the reflection of a man who would either face his madness or drown in it. In the distance, the clocks ticked ominously, a reminder of time's relentless march. The shadows lengthened around us, stretching like fingers reaching into the void. The jester smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes, as if he could see both the light and the darkness intertwined in a dance that only the two of them could comprehend. Would the king take the final step into madness, or would he grasp the thread of sanity, weaving it into a tapestry that could perhaps still save them all? The air buzzed with anticipation, the tension a taut wire ready to snap. The laughter, once hollow, now felt like a promise, a whisper of what could be if only they dared to confront the mirror that was their shared reality. And we stood there, breath held, hearts pounding, waiting for the inevitable collision of madness and truth, where the shadows would finally break free from the light. The court was a tapestry of whispers, punctuated by the metallic clink of goblets and the rustle of silk garments. The air thickened with tension as the jester, a fleeting shadow among the opulence, took center stage. His motley garb, a riot of colors that seemed to mock the very fabric of reality, clung to him like a second skin, a barrier against the madness that brewed just beyond the gilded walls. Why did the king cross the road? He paused, a grin spreading across his painted face, stretching the corners of his mouth until they ached. To get to the other side. But alas, his horse had other plans. The audience erupted in laughter, but it was a brittle sound, the kind that veils the heart's true pulse. A jester's job was to adorn the throne's foolishness with a crown of laughter, yet in that laughter lay a dread that twisted like smoke in the throat. King Alaric sat upon his throne, his eyes glazed, pupils wide as if he were staring into a void. The flickering candlelight danced across his face, illuminating the shadows that clung to him like secrets. He wore a crown of gold, but it felt like a noose, digging deeper as he sank further into his own delusions. "Bring me the moon," he bellowed suddenly, his voice sharp as a blade, slicing through the mirth. "I shall wear it as a hat." The jester quivered, heart pounding against his ribcage, a caged bird desperate for flight. "My lord, the moon is rather distant," he replied, his voice laced with a tremor of humor that masked the fear roiling inside. With each jest, he walked a tightrope over an abyss, acutely aware that one misstep could plunge him into darkness. He glanced at Lady Alara, her beauty a stark contrast to the chaos that surrounded them. Her eyes, deep pools of sorrow, flickered with unspoken words. She was trapped, a chess piece moved by a mad king, and each day brought her closer to a fate as grim as the executioner's axe. The jester felt her despair like a heavy stone in his chest, a reminder that their lives danced on the edge of a knife, sharp and unforgiving. "Milady," he whispered as he spun to face her, "if the king's heart is as fickle as the wind, then perhaps we should tie it to a kite and let it fly." A chuckle escaped her lips, brief and fragile, a momentary brightness in a room suffocated by shadows. But there was no time for solace. The king's laughter rang out, a discordant note that echoed through the hall like a funeral dirge. "More," he roared, his voice a tempest. "More foolishness. More revelry." His eyes sparkled with a madness that defied reason, a chaotic dance that tugged at the corners of sanity. The jester swallowed hard, grappling with the weight of his role. Was he a clown? A fool? Or was he the lone voice in a room full of sycophants, the only one daring to confront the truth without wielding a sword? "Your Majesty," he began, his heart racing as he stepped closer, "what if we summoned the stars instead? They are far more reliable." The laughter was hesitant this time, a trembling response that felt like a harbinger of doom. The king's gaze shifted, a storm brewing beneath the surface, the clouds of insanity thickening. "Fool! Do you dare mock me?" The air crackled with tension. The jester's mask threatened to crack under the weight of the truth he was weaving. "I shall have the stars, or I shall have your head." Each heartbeat echoed like a war drum, a rhythm of dread and defiance. The jester's mind raced, memories flickering like candle flames. "I remember the last time you sought the stars, my lord," he offered, desperation weaving through his words. You sent the royal guards on a wild goose chase, only to find them in a tavern, drunk on mead and singing to the heavens. The king's lips twitched, a flicker of something, humor? Regret, before his ire flared once more. Enough! I am the king. My word is law. Elara's eyes widened, and the jester felt the weight of her silent plea. Please, they seemed to whisper, do not provoke him further. But the jester was caught in a maelstrom of emotions. The absurdity of it all gnawed at him. He could feel the sharp edge of despair, the haunting chill of uncertainty, yet he was there, a fragile beacon of hope, a fool standing against a king unraveling at the seams. Then let us make a toast, he proclaimed, voice ringing with forced cheer. To the king, who seeks the moon and the stars, even if they're just dreams. He raised his goblet high, and the crowd hesitated, the tension palpable as they mirrored his gesture, uncertain yet yearning for safety. Dreams. Alaric spat, his voice a tempest of rage. Dreams are for the weak. I am a king. I demand everything. Yet in that chaos, a moment crystallized, a heartbeat, a breath, a collision of worlds. The jester could feel it, the icy grip of fate tightening around their throats, the unsteady balance of power shifting like sand beneath their feet. He had become the mirror reflecting the king's folly, and with each jest, he was pulled further into the tempest. Ah, but a king without dreams is nothing more than a jest, he retorted, his heart pounding fiercely, raw and wild. The eyes of the court were upon him, a sea of faces, some filled with dread, others with dawning realization. The jester had become a spark, igniting a fire that threatened to engulf them all. Laughter erupted, but it was tinged with fear, the sound rising and falling like the tide against the shore of sanity. The jester's heart raced, thundering in his chest, a relentless drumbeat urging him toward the precipice. He could see Elara's face, her mask slipping, and in her gaze, he found the tether of his own humanity. And then, it happened, a flicker of recognition, a shared understanding that bound them together in that fleeting moment against the king's madness. The laughter faltered, a heartbeat of silence falling like a shroud, poised on the edge of a knife. A jester and a lady, two souls entwined in a dance of survival, caught in the tempest of a reckless king whose laughter echoed like a ghost in the hall. And still, the jester stood. Each jest was a lifeline, each laugh a tether to some anchor of reality. But the storm was raging, and the night was far from over. The moon hung in the sky, distant and unyielding, while the shadows whispered dark promises. The tension surged, electric and raw, as the king's laughter turned to thunder, and the jester braced himself for what was to come. The line between folly and madness blurred, and the night's true dance was only beginning. The rain hammered against the roof, a relentless symphony of chaos, each drop a reminder of the world outside. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the flickering candlelight casting elongated shadows that danced like ghosts on the chipped walls. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, an urgent metronome keeping pace with the surging fear that gripped me. We were trapped here, the three of us, a fragile trio bound together by a dark humor that felt more like a curse than a comfort. Across the room, Lila stood, her hands trembling as she gripped a bottle of cheap bourbon. You know what they say, she said, forcing a laugh that cracked like glass, alcohol makes you brave. But her eyes were wide, reflecting the terror that threatened to swallow us whole. She was our jokester, the one who could always find a punchline even in the bleakest of circumstances, but now her laughter felt like a thin veil over the abyss. Courage is overrated, I chimed in, trying to keep the mood light, but my voice quivered, betraying the facade. I mean, who needs it when you can just run? I motioned towards the door, which felt like a portal to a nightmare. Outside, the storm howled, a blend of wind and rain, as if the universe was mocking our plight. But deep down, I knew running was not an option. Not anymore. Then there was Greg, hunched in the corner, a shadow of his former self. He used to be the stoic one, the rock. But the madness that lurked just outside our sanctuary had chipped away at his resolve, leaving behind a hollow version of the man we once knew. What's the point? He murmured, almost to himself. We're just prolonging the inevitable. His words hung in the air, a heavy fog of despair that seeped into our bones. Come on, Greg, I urged, desperate to shake him from his stupor. You're the one who said we had to fight. We can't just sit here and wait for. I didn't finish. The thought of what awaited us outside was too grotesque to vocalize. The storm raged on, but my mind drifted, unbidden, to memories of laughter, sunlit days spent under the vast sky, where jokes flew like kites, untethered and free. I remembered our absurd debates over which medieval plague would be worse, pestilence or war. At least with war, I'd said, you get a chance to defend yourself. With pestilence, it's just surprise. You're dead. It had always brought a laugh, but now, the irony of it struck me like a dagger. Remember that time we tried to cook a rat? Lila's voice broke through my reverie. We thought we were so clever, like little chefs in a dystopian cooking show. She forced a smile, but it was fragile, crumbling under the weight of our reality. Turns out, it's just really earthy. The tension broke momentarily, and we shared a laugh, but it felt like one of those distant echoes from another life, a desperate attempt to mask our fear with humor. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from outside, the sound cutting through our laughter like a serrated knife. We froze, the air thickening with dread. Had they found us? The thought sent a jolt through my spine. I glanced at Greg, who had gone pale, and Lila, whose smile had vanished, replaced by stark terror. What was that? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. Before I could respond, the door rattled violently, like a madman trying to break in. It's them, Greg rasped, his eyes wide with panic. They've come for us. I could see the layers of defiance crumbling within him, the shadows of hopelessness creeping in. This was not a joke anymore. It was survival, raw and unrefined. I took a deep breath, steadying my racing heart. We need a plan, I said, though uncertainty gnawed at my insides. The door shook again, and a chilling laugh echoed through the storm, a sound that turned my blood to ice. It was a laugh that carried with it the weight of inevitability, a cruel reminder of our mortality. They were here, and we were cornered like animals. Come on, let's barricade the door, Lila urged, her voice gaining strength as her survival instincts kicked in. Together, we rushed to the entrance, our hearts pounding in sync, a frantic rhythm echoing our desperation. We piled chairs against the door, our movements frantic, fueled by adrenaline and fear. The laughter grew louder, more taunting, intertwining with the storm outside, a cacophony of chaos that threatened to drown us. Greg, now a shadow of resolve, clutched his head in frustration, the weight of our situation bearing down on him. It's pointless, we're going to die here, he muttered, teeth clenched, suffocated by despair. Stop, I snapped, the urgency in my voice surprising even me. You're not helping. My heart raced, not just from the fear but from the reality that crumbled around us. The humor that once sustained us was now a cruel reminder of our predicament, transforming into a sharpened edge that could cut us all. Lila grabbed Greg's arm, her grip firm. We're going to fight, or at least go down laughing, right? That's what we do. Her defiance sparked something in me, a flicker of hope amidst the horror. This was it, our moment to decide. Would we let fear consume us, or would we channel it into something fierce, something that echoed through the darkness? The door shuddered again, the laughter outside morphing into shouts, a symphony of malice that wrapped around us like a noose. I could feel the weight of time pressing down, each tick of the clock was a reminder of our fleeting chance. We were not just fighting for survival, we were fighting for the very essence of who we were. I remembered the absurdity of life, the ridiculousness of our fears, how we laughed in the face of death, how we spun tales of glory in the midst of despair. Lila, do you have any more of that bourbon? I asked, forcing a grin that felt like a mask. We might need it for our last stand. She blinked, hesitation flickering in her eyes, but then she smirked and nodded, handing me the bottle. It felt heavy in my hands, a reminder of the life we once knew. To survival tactics, I toasted, my voice shaky but determined. And to the best damn friends a person could ask for. We clinked the bottle together, the sound ringing out against the chaos outside, a defiance that rose above the storm. And in that moment, I knew, humor was our weapon, our shield against the darkness. Even if it turned deadly, we would wield it fiercely, laughing in the face of the inevitable. Because sometimes, laughter was the only thing that could drown out the fear. And as the door rattled again, we stood united, ready to face whatever horror awaited us, a trio against the night. The shadows loomed, but we were not merely shadows ourselves. We were a force of absurdity, a flicker of light in a world gone dark. And we were not done yet. The air hung thick, like a curtain of dread, as laughter echoed through the stone halls of the castle, a laughter that sent icy fingers curling around the spine. It was a sound more monstrous than any scream, a laughter that twisted and turned, morphing into something unrecognizable. The king's voice, deep and rich, resonated, but beneath the joviality lay a tremor of madness, a promise of chaos. Jesters moved through the shadows, their faces painted with grotesque smiles, each step a dance of survival on the razor's edge. I remember the first time I saw Mortimer, the king's favorite fool, his cap adorned with bells that jingled like death knells. He stood before the throne, the warmth of the fire casting flickering shadows across his painted cheeks. His eyes darted, wary yet playful, assessing the room for danger. Mortimer was a master of flattery, a man whose tongue could weave honeyed words from the bitterest of truths. He approached the throne with a bow so low it seemed he might kiss the dusty floor, a laugh bubbling just beneath the surface, but in that moment, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers trembled against his belly. "Your Majesty," he crooned, his voice a silky caress, "the sun shines even brighter when it reflects off your glorious crown." The king chuckled, a sound that filled the room with dread and delight. Yet I could sense the lie hovering just beneath, a truth too dangerous to utter. Mortimer knew the dance, a step too far could turn adoration into anger faster than the blade could flash. Then there was Eloan, the sharp-witted jester, a woman whose humor sliced through the gloom like a dagger through flesh. She was a tempest of emotion, laughter spilling forth like rain on a parched desert, yet behind her bright eyes lurked shadows of sorrow. Eloan, with her wild hair and a voice that crackled with energy, moved like a phantom through the court, her wit both a shield and a weapon. "Ah, my king," she would exclaim, "your wisdom outshines the stars. A true philosopher among mere mortals." Her praises were riddled with hints, a careful evasion, for she was always aware of the delicate balance between admiration and disdain. But there was a darkness in the air tonight, a whisper of something cruel that draped over the revelry like a funeral shroud. The king's mood had turned, shifting like shadows under the waning moon. Mortimer's laughter faltered, a thin line of fear etched across his brow. The king's eyes glinted, wild and unpredictable, and a silence fell over the room, a silence that screamed louder than any roar. I remember the moment clearly, the way the air seemed to thicken, every heartbeat echoing in my ears. The king's hand shot out, fingers curling like claws. "You think you can amuse me," he spat, his voice low and dangerous. Mortimer's facade crumbled for a heartbeat, the artful mask slipping as panic bubbled within him. Eloan's heart raced, her breath caught in her throat. This was the crux of survival, the moment where laughter could twist into a noose. I remember the stories of the old kings, Mortimer stammered, fumbling for safety, how they favored the wit of their jesters above all else. "Oh, but none could be as entertaining as you, my liege." Words poured from him now, a desperate flood, the truth drowning in a sea of flattery. I felt the tension, a weight pressing down. He was walking a fine line, a tightrope stretched over the abyss. Eloan's mind raced. She knew that evasion was her only ally. "Ah, but jesters are but mirrors," she interjected, her voice ringing with a false cheer. "Reflecting the brilliance of your glory. We are but humble servants to your magnificence." The king's gaze flickered, drawn in by her audacity, and for an instant, hope flared like a candle against the dark. But the darkness was relentless. I could see it then, the way the king's expression shifted, fury blazing like a firestorm. "Amuse me, or I will have your heads," he growled, his laughter morphing into something terrifying, a harbinger of violence. Mortimer's breath hitched, and I could feel the cold sweat pooling at the nape of his neck. In that heart-stopping moment, I sensed the true artistry of these jesters. They were not merely entertainers, but warriors in a world where humor danced dangerously close to the edge of madness. Mortimer's voice rang out, trembling yet brave, "Your Majesty, if I may, let me share a jest that echoes through the ages." The word spilled forth like a lifeline, and for a fleeting moment, the king leaned in, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Eloan seized the opportunity, her laughter piercing through the gloom. A jest, dear Mortimer? Or perhaps a riddle? For only a fool would dare to face the wisdom of a mad king. With every word, she danced precariously on the line of sanity, her heart pounding a wild rhythm of defiance. The king's eyes, once venomous, shimmered with intrigue, and for a heartbeat, the storm abated. But I knew that this moment was an illusion, a temporary reprieve. The shadows loomed, whispering of the king's unpredictability, of the fragile thread that separated life from the abyss. Jesters were not simply entertainers, they were the very essence of survival, weaving their fates with threads of flattery and evasion, thrusting themselves into the jaws of madness. And as laughter rang hollow in the echoing hall, I understood their heart-wrenching dance, each jest a desperate plea, each chuckle a facade to mask the terror beneath. Mortimer and Eloan were not just surviving, they were thriving in the chaos, their lives balanced on the knife's edge of humor and despair, a macabre ballet that defied the darkness threatening to swallow them whole. Each moment swirled into the next, layered with tension, as though time itself held its breath. They were the ghosts of a broken kingdom, forever bound to the whims of a mad king, their hearts pulsing with the rhythm of laughter and fear. I felt it in my bones, the weight of their struggle, the echo of their existence, a reminder that life, in all its absurdity, danced precariously on the edge of madness, where jesters wore their smiles like armor, and every laugh was a gamble with fate. The air crackled with anticipation, an electric promise of what was yet to come. The king's laughter cut through the air like a sword, sharp and unforgiving, echoing in the dimly lit chamber. I stood there, heart hammering in my chest, the weight of 1,000 secrets pressing down like the oppressive heat of summer. The jest that had sparked it all danced on my lips, a cruel reminder of the razor-thin line between mirth and madness. I had dared to mock the crown, to lay bare the absurdity of their lavish feast while the kingdom outside bled in silence. In that moment, I was not just a court jester, I was a fool teetering on the edge of a precipice. The flickering candlelight cast ghostly shadows on the walls, the shadows of men who had once laughed, and laughed too hard. I remembered their faces, pale and twisted in terror, the echoes of their fate chilling me to the bone. I swallowed hard, glancing at my companion, a sullen figure cloaked in velvet, the ever-loyal Sir Reginald. His eyes, usually bright with mischief, now mirrored the storm brewing within me. "Do you think they'll take it well?" I whispered, every word laced with the tremor of fear. Sir Reginald, the ever-pragmatic knight, shrugged, but the corners of his mouth quirked upward, a dark smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I suppose it depends on whether the king finds his crown amusing," he said, a hint of sarcasm peppering his tone. But the laughter of the court, once a comforting blanket, now felt like a noose tightening around my throat. I could almost see the gallows looming in the distance, a stark reminder of where this night might lead. As the king turned his gaze toward me, his eyes glinted with malice, and I felt the air around us thicken, a taut wire, ready to snap. "What's this?" he bellowed, his voice booming through the hall. "Another jest from our beloved fool." "Your Majesty," I said, my voice a wisp of a whisper, "I merely spoke the truth wrapped in a riddle. The kingdom suffers, yet we feast like kings. Is it not a jest worthy of your laughter?" The room held its breath. The courtiers exchanged glances, their faces a tapestry of fear, hope, and the unspoken understanding that this night would not end well for someone, perhaps for me. The king's jaw tightened, and I could almost hear the gears of his mind whirling, weighing my fate against the weight of his pride. "Truth," he spat, the word dripping with venom. "Speak not of truth when you wear the guise of a fool. You think to mock me? To entertain with your insolence?" Panic clawed at my throat, but somewhere deep inside, a flicker of defiance ignited. I had never intended to provoke the crown, I merely wished to reflect the absurdity of our lives. The hunger gnawing at the populace, the laughter that masked tragedy, couldn't he see? But like a ship lost at sea, I was adrift, and the king's wrath was a storm on the horizon. And then, I saw her, the queen, seated regally, her eyes shimmering with a dangerous blend of pity and disdain. Eleanor, the heart of the court, the one who held power behind the throne. Her silence was a sharp blade, cutting deeper than the king's fury. In that moment, I understood, to offend the crown was to dance with shadows, to invite ghosts of the past to whisper threats in the night. I turned to Sir Reginald, my ally turned spectator, his face a mask of concern. "What do I do?" I urged, my voice raw. Every heartbeat echoed the same question, a mantra of desperation. "Play your part," he murmured, his eyes darting toward the king, whose fist now slammed against the table, rattling goblets and shattering the fragile calm. "But tread lightly, fool." The laughter had turned cold, a wolf's growl masking the true hunger that lurked beneath. "Guard! Seize him," the king commanded, and the moment stretched into eternity, my heart a drumbeat of impending doom. I could feel the eyes of the court upon me, watching with a morbid curiosity that sent shivers down my spine. The guards closed in, their faces hard as stone, yet I couldn't help but smile. The absurdity of it all. Here I was, a mere jester, holding a mirror to a world that thrived on illusion, and for that, I was to be punished. I had laughed with a kingdom, and now I would pay the price. But before they could lay hands on me, a flicker of rebellion sparked within. As I faced the king, I raised my voice, steady and defiant. "Your Majesty, I am but a humble fool. Let me remind you that laughter is a fleeting thing, a spark that brightens the darkest nights. You wear your crown heavy, and I offer only a moment of respite. For laughter, my lord, is the only armor we have against despair." His eyes narrowed, the tension coiling tighter, and I could almost hear the whispers of fate weaving around me, ghostly fingers crafting a tapestry of dread. The queen's gaze bore down on me, piercing through the chaos. In a breath, the moment crystallized. Here was the heart of our conflict, the clash of pride against vulnerability. "Enough," the king thundered, the fury of a tempest. He stood, towering over us all, a figure wreathed in shadows. "You have had your jest, fool. But understand this, the crown does not take lightly to mockery. There will be consequences." A chill swept through the hall, shadows flickering as if to mock the very notion of light. The laughter dissolved into a brittle silence, and I felt the weight of my fate pressing against me, a heavy shroud of inevitability. I could see the gallows now, a phantom in the corner of my vision, whispering promises of a swift end. But beneath the dread, I felt something else, an ember of courage, a spark of hope. I was not merely a fool, but a voice in the darkness, a reminder that laughter, in all its absurdity, carried the weight of truth. And as I stood before the crown, I knew that even in the face of despair, the price of laughter could never be too great. The tension hung in the air, thick as blood, but I would not bow. Not yet. The night was far from over, and the echoes of our lives danced like ghosts in the shadows. The laughter, the pain, the absurdity, this was our world, and it was beautiful, even in its madness. The night hung thick with dread, the air electric, a palpable tension vibrating through the stone halls of the castle. Torches flickered like the hearts of men, shadows dancing wildly, teasing at the edges of sanity. I was there, my feet cold against the flagstone, heart racing like a hunted hare as laughter echoed, though it was a laughter twisted and sharp, a wolfish cackle from a perilous throne. King Athelstan, his mind a tempest of madness, sat adorned in a crown that had begun to resemble a noose, a diadem of dreams turned to nightmares. There was Marl, the jester, his face painted in a mask of joy, the vibrant colors of his motley contrasting with the murk that surrounded him. His eyes, however, betrayed a truth, a glimmer of fear lodged deep within. I remember the moment he took a step forward, a single breath caught in the stillness. In that heartbeat, the world tilted. He was supposed to make them laugh, but now? He stood at the precipice of doom. "Your Majesty," he ventured, voice trembling, "what is the difference between a madman and a king?" Silence flooded the hall, thick as the fog rolling off the marshes outside, a silence that screamed. Athelstan's laughter ceased, replaced by a tightness in his jaw and a glint of rage beneath his wild gaze. We all held our breaths, suspended in an unholy moment of dread. I remember the ugly twist of his lips, the way his fingers drummed against the armrest of his throne, a desperate countdown to catastrophe. Marl, with his heart racing and hands trembling, attempted to soften the edges of his words, to weave humor into the fabric of a situation that was rapidly unraveling. For a madman, the world is a stage of chaos, while a king, he faltered, desperation creeping in, a king can create order, or destroy it. His breath, quick and staccato, danced in the charged air. But Athelstan, with a mind spiraling into darkness, saw only the threat beneath the jest, the razor blade hidden in the laughter. "You dare question me?" The king's voice was thunder, a storm brewing behind his eyes, an echoed promise of violence. There was another, lurking in the shadows of my memory, a jester named Hargrove, a man of sharp wit and sharper tongue, who once crossed the line of madness in a court not unlike Athelstan's. A bold fool, he, who dared to mock the king's ever-changing whims. I remember the day he stood beneath the gallows, the noose swaying gently above him like a pendulum of fate. He had said, "Sire, blind men do not see the beauty in your crown. But fools? We see through the glint of gold to the rust beneath." The laughter that followed was hollow, the court's fragile sanity cracking like ice underfoot. Just days later, Hargrove danced his last dance, his neck snapped like a twig under the weight of a king's fury. A lesson learned too late: jests can turn, tongues can be severed by sharpened truths. Marl, standing before Athelstan, felt the ghost of Hargrove's fate brush against his skin. I saw it, a flicker of recognition, a shudder that ran through him, echoing in the hollow of my own chest. His past, those shadowy memories, wove into his present, a tight noose of fear. "Your laugh, my king, is a gift to the world. If only they could see its beauty, the way I do." The king's eyes narrowed, the madness simmering just beneath the surface. "Beauty? You think me beautiful, Jester?" "Beauty is a mask that hides decay." With each word, the air thickened, and we all felt it, the knife of tension carving deeper into the space between them. The guards shifted uneasily, their hands itching toward the hilts of their swords, hearts beating a chorus of fear. I remember breathing shallowly, wishing the walls could swallow us whole, wishing I could turn back time to the laughter before the shadows, before the madness. Then, the moment broke like glass. Athelstan, primal fury igniting his eyes, stood. "You would dare compare my reign to decay?" His voice was a storm, a maelstrom of wrath. "You have made your jests, and now, you will face the consequences. Let the jester taste of his own folly." As the guards moved, a wave of horror washed over me, Marl's face twisted into a mask of disbelief, his eyes pleading for the mercy that seldom graced a mad king's court. I remember the chilling clank of metal against metal, the jester's laughter strangled beneath the weight of his fate. A moment stretched into eternity, Marl stood frozen, the colors of his motley fading, the laughter burning in his throat. "I only wish to bring joy," he cried, a desperate plea echoing in the stone chamber. But Athelstan, lost in his madness, saw only betrayal, a dagger hidden behind the mask of mirth. And in that instant, I felt the world shift again. The air thickened, the shadows lengthened, a premonition of doom hung in the balance. I remember the sound, a thunderous roar that shattered the fragile silence, a horror that gripped my heart. The guards lunged, and all at once, laughter turned to scream, joy twisted into anguish. Marl fell, his vibrant colors bleeding into the stone floor, an artist's palette turned to ash. I wanted to close my eyes, to shield myself from the sight, but I couldn't look away. The court was a tableau of despair, the jester's laughter, once a bright spark, extinguished in an instant, leaving only the echo of madness resounding through those darkened halls. This was the cost of truth, the price of humor in the court of a madman. And in the silence that followed, a silence pregnant with death and sorrow, I felt a chill creep into my bones. The remnants of laughter hung heavy in the air, dark and haunting, a ghost of what could have been. And as I turned to leave, the weight of Marl's fate settling like a shroud over my heart, I knew this would not be the last time a fool would dance upon the precipice of madness and fall, lost to the shadows, forever a whisper in the darkness. In the kingdom of kings, where jesters tread lightly, the line between laughter and death is a thin, frayed thread. And I shuddered, knowing the dance was far from over. The laughter echoes down the dimly lit hallway, a hollow sound that ricochets off peeling wallpaper and flickering light bulbs, a cruel twist of fate in a place where joy should be a distant memory. I'm standing there, heart pounding, just outside room 203, feeling like a voyeur in a world of sharp edges and raw nerves. The moment hangs thick in the air, and I can't decide whether to step back or rush in. That laughter, it claws at my insides, a desperate cry masked in humor, a siren call that pulls me closer. Inside, Nora sits cross-legged on the floor, her hair a wild tempest of curls that frame her face like a halo gone wrong. What do you call a psychotic who tells jokes? She giggles, eyes gleaming with manic energy. A punchline. Her voice breaks, laughter spilling out like a river flooding its banks, and I can feel the fragile line of sanity stretching taut. I remember the first time I heard her laugh. It was the kind of sound that made the world feel a little brighter, a hint of sunlight breaking through the clouds of despair. But now, the laughter warps, twisting into something jagged, a knife-edged reminder of the tug-of-war within her mind. It's both beautiful and terrifying, the way she dances on that line between reality and madness, teetering like a tightrope walker with no safety net. Don't you get it, Evan? She chokes out between gasps of laughter, the way her hands twitch in excited bursts. We're all mad here. Just some of us wear it better. Her eyes flash, a kaleidoscope of light and shadow, and I can't help but feel the pull. I want to join her, to laugh with her, to plunge into the chaos and forget the world outside. But Evan, oh, Evan. He stands in the corner, arms crossed tightly over his chest, a fortress built from pain and regret. His face is a mask, one I've seen too often, a void where joy should be. The laughter doesn't reach him, it bounces off his skin like raindrops on pavement. Nora, he murmurs, voice low and steady, like a soothing balm in the storm. This isn't a joke. You can't keep pretending. I see the way his eyes flicker, a spark of fear igniting as he looks at her. He wants to save her, but the weight of his own demons shadows his resolve. The room feels small, breathing in the shared tension, the suffocating silence between feigned laughter. I can see it in the lines of Nora's smile, how it falters, how it twists into something jagged and desperate. What's the difference between a crazy person and a sane one? She asks, her voice a whisper now, a fragile thread hanging in the air. There's a gravity to her words that pulls us in, that drags us down into a dark abyss where humor fades and raw emotion reigns supreme. You can't tell, she finally answers, her laughter fading into a hollow echo. You just can't. A chill spreads through the room, and I feel it crawl up my spine, igniting every nerve ending as I watch the shadows dance on the walls, a grotesque ballet of fear and longing. I remember my own struggles with the fragile line, the way I'd joke about my darkness to mask the fear creeping in at night, the way I'd wear my laughter like armor. It's a heavy weight, that laughter, a cruel joke played on those who don't understand the depth of despair hiding just beneath the surface. Nora's laughter fades, replaced by an eerie silence that fills the room like a thick fog. I glance at Evan, watching him wrestle with his own thoughts, the torment etched deep into his features. You can't save her, a voice whispers in the back of my mind, taunting me, yet I refuse to acknowledge it. I step closer, my heart racing, the air thickening with unspoken words. Nora, I say, my voice barely a breath. What if we don't have to choose between sanity and madness? What if we can find a way to live with both? Her gaze snaps to mine, and for a moment, we're suspended in time, two souls tangled in the complexities of existence. You think so? She asks, hope flickering in her eyes like a candle in the wind. But that hope is short-lived as Evan's voice cuts through the moment. You can't romanticize it. It's dangerous. His words hang heavy, a shroud of reality smothering the light. Isn't it already dangerous? I counter, desperation creeping into my tone as I reach for Nora's hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine, grounding me in the chaos. What's wrong with finding humor in our madness? Or at least trying to. The laughter returns, but it's different now, laced with something darker, a raw edge that slices through the air. What's wrong? Nora echoes, eyes wide with something that resembles clarity. Everything's wrong. And funny. And beautiful. The contradictions tumble from her lips, a reflection of the turmoil inside her, a dance of shadows and light. Evan watches us, torn between the desire to protect her from the abyss and the reality that he can't. I can feel his heart beating, each thump a reminder of the fragile line we're all walking. You think you can laugh it off, he whispers, voice thick with emotion. You think that makes it better? The room is alive with tension, each breath a fragile thread connecting us, and I realize this is more than just a confrontation, it's a reckoning. Maybe it doesn't make it better, but it makes it bearable, I respond, my voice steady, anchored in the storm. And sometimes, in the darkest moments, laughter is all we have left. Nora's eyes sparkle like stars in a pitch-black sky, a hint of understanding shining through the chaos. I remember when laughter was enough, she says softly, and my heart aches for the girl she once was, for the girl we both want to save. And as the laughter fades, leaving echoes of uncertainty in its wake, the fragile line stretches taut, ready to snap. The air crackles with energy, anticipation swirling around us like a tempest, and I know that whatever comes next will tip us into the depths of our own madness. We stand there, caught in the storm, hearts pounding, souls bared to the cosmic void, waiting for the next laugh to shatter the silence, a whisper of hope, a promise of chaos. And I can't help but think, in the fragile line between sanity and madness, maybe we're all just one punchline away from falling apart. The palace is silent, an eerie stillness hangs in the air, thick as fog. It's the kind of silence that screams, echoing in the hollows of the stone walls, where laughter once flowed like wine spilled from goblets. I remember the shadows dancing across the marble floor, long and twisted, as if mocking the very essence of what was once a court filled with merriment and madness alike. Now, the only thing that stirs is the laughter of a jester, nervous and hollow, cutting through the tension like a knife's edge. Your Grace, the jester croaks, standing before the king, his painted face a mask of feigned joy. If I may jest, your thoughts seem to wander like a lost sheep. The room gasps, a collective intake of breath, the kind that fills the lungs with dread, the kind that speaks of unspoken boundaries crossed. Each face is a canvas of horror, an unflinching testament to a line drawn in the dust, now irrevocably blurred. I remember the king's eyes, glazed like the surface of a still lake before a storm, lost yet turbulent, a whirlpool of uncertainty. Yes, they laughed, but their laughter hung heavy, daring the king to react, to prove them wrong. But the precarious nature of humor when aimed at the throne, that's where the danger lies. In the corner, Lady Eleanora sits, her heart thundering against her ribs. She knows the risks all too well. Once a confidant, now a spectre in her own home, she gazes at the jester, her mind a tempest of fear and guilt. Can one laugh at the madness of a monarch without the weight of consequence? She remembers her own words, whispered in hushed corridors, what is sanity in the face of power? Yet, witnessing the king's descent into shadows, she wonders if they've all become unwitting accomplices in a tragic comedy, where the joke may be on them. Mirth, my liege, the jester persists, his voice a tremor, without it, we wilt like unwatered flowers. Perhaps your mind has wandered into the garden of the lost? Shall I fetch a gardener? The pun lands like a stone in a pond, rippling through the crowd, each wave a reminder of the chasm growing between jest and cruelty. Eleanora shifts, her stomach twisting, a marionette tangled in its strings. How many times had they chuckled over a tankard of ale, mocking the king's absent-mindedness? How many absurd tales had they spun, painting the king as a fool, a caricature dancing on the edges of sanity? Each jest a blade, sharp and glimmering, the kind that could slice through loyalty, leaving only blooded allegiance in its wake. I remember her mother's voice, warning her of the fickleness of favor, of the dangers of a jesting tongue. Yet here they are, standing on the precipice, she and the jester, puppets in a play directed by fate. The king's laughter, twisted and hollow, echoes in her mind, tightening around her throat like a noose. Is it a joke, or is it a lamentation of a man unraveling? Your Majesty, Eleanora calls, her voice trembling, barely more than a whisper lost in the echo of the jester's antics. Perhaps we should tread lightly. Her heart races, an erratic drumbeat in the quiet that follows, but the jester's laughter bounces off the walls like a wild beast, untamed and hungry. The lady's right, he quips, but his tone is sharp, edged with anxiety, the garden is rife with thorns, and one slip could lead to silence, roars the king, the word crashing through the chamber like a thunderclap. The air vibrates, charged with an energy that makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. His face, once placid, contorts into something unrecognizable, a beast awakened, eyes blazing with a fire that threatens to consume them all. Every breath feels heavy now, suffocating. I can feel the tension tightening, a noose of unspoken dread, pulling tighter with each heartbeat. How precarious it is, this dance around a mind teetering on the edge. The jester laughs, but it's a laugh tinged with fear, an instinctive defense against the darkness. Eleanora's heart pounds like the wings of a restless bird, trapped within the cage of her chest. She understands the unspoken truth, the fragility of their existence, the king's mental state, a topic to be navigated with the utmost care, lest they tumble into an abyss forged of laughter and madness. Yet she knows the irony of it all. They had laughed, and laughter had always been their shield. But what happens when the punchline exposes the vulnerability of a king? Reflecting on the echoes of history, I remember the whispers of jesters gone awry, heads rolling beneath the guillotine, where humor turned sour, snapping back like a whip against the hand that wielded it. The ghosts of those past loom over them, specters of a truth they'd rather not confront. "Your Majesty," Lady Eleanora presses, her voice trembling but resolute, "we must be wary. Laughter can be a weapon, just as dangerous as it is a balm." Her words hang in the air, thick and palpable, as if the room itself holds its breath, waiting for the king's response. But he does not respond. Instead, the silence stretches, a rubber band pulled to the brink of snapping. An eternity unfurls in that moment, a pause heavy with tension, where hope and dread merge into an indistinguishable haze. The jester fidgets, his painted smile faltering, and for a heartbeat, I see fear mirror itself in Eleanora's eyes. How fragile they all are, standing upon the precipice of madness, dancing on the razor's edge between jest and tragedy. What is humor when the laughter fades? What is life when the king's mind hangs like a pendulum, swinging between sanity and despair? I remember, the darkness lurking behind the veil of jest, the echoes of laughter twisting into something far more sinister. And in that moment, as the king's gaze sweeps across the room, I realize they are all caught in a web of their own making, jokes spun like silk, now binding them tightly, with each strand a reminder of their complicity. The laughter echoes, haunting and hollow, a prelude to the chaos that might ensue. Every heartbeat reverberates, every breath a laborious reminder of the stakes at play. What lies ahead is an uncharted territory, a landscape filled with the ghosts of choices made and unmade, where humor and cruelty intertwine in a macabre dance, holding them captive in a game where the only certainty is uncertainty, and the cost of laughter may be far too high. The sound of laughter echoed through the stone corridors, a cacophony that was both joyous and haunting, as if the walls themselves were mocking the weight of despair. I stood in the dim light, feeling the chill of the air clawing at my skin, the shadows draping over me like a funeral shroud. My heart raced, the rhythm of panic pounding against my ribs, and I thought, what madness it is to laugh in a world so heavy with sorrow. There he was, the jester, his face painted in garish strokes of red and yellow, a stark contrast to the darkness lurking beneath his smile. I watched him as he danced, the bells on his cap jingling like distant chimes of a clock counting down to demise. He spun and twirled, a whirlwind of color and chaos, but beneath the vibrant facade, I could see the cracks, the tremors of a soul unraveling. His eyes, wide and manic, held stories of grief I could not begin to fathom, memories that seeped through the cracks of his painted mask. I remember the moment he turned to me, the laughter fading into an eerie silence that wrapped around us like a fog. "Do you ever feel," he asked, voice trembling, "like you're the only one laughing at your own funeral?" The question hung in the air, a noose tightening around my throat. I felt my breath hitch, the absurdity of his words hammering at my heart. In that instant, I became the audience, not just a witness to his performance but a participant in his anguish. Across the room, Marjorie watched with a mixture of concern and fascination. She was a tapestry of contradictions, bold yet fragile, bright yet shadowed by despair. I had seen her laugh, truly laugh, but today her smile was as brittle as the autumn leaves scattered across the ground. A jester and a woman both trapped in their own prisons, bound by the expectations of a world that demanded joy while offering only sorrow. "Why do we wear these masks?" Marjorie whispered, her voice a soft tremor. The question hung between us, heavy and laden with unspoken truths. Why do we pretend? Her eyes bore into mine, the desperation of understanding etched deeply into her brow. I wanted to reach out, to anchor her back from the edge of her thoughts, but I too was teetering, caught in the whirlwind of emotion swirling around us. The jester, now spinning faster, looked as if he might take flight, but the ground beneath him trembled with uncertainty. "Life is but a stage," he sang, his voice rising against the oppressive silence, "and I am its fool." But the laughter was hollow, an echo of a cry for help, reverberating off the cold stone walls. I could see it then, the fear in his eyes, the weight of his own absurd existence pressing down like the mantle of a heavy crown. I remember the moment, my heart breaking with the realization, he wasn't just the entertainer, he was the embodiment of pain dressed in laughter. Time shifted, stretched like the shadows that danced around us. I looked at Marjorie, her memories flickered like candle flames, illuminating moments of joy lost to the encroaching darkness. I saw her past, the laughter of children playing in the streets, the warmth of arms embracing her, the echoes of dreams that once felt tangible. But the laughter had faded, replaced by the echoes of loss. "I feel like I've forgotten how to be happy," she said, her voice cracking, "like happiness is a distant land I can no longer reach." The jester's laughter faltered, a jagged breath slicing through the tension, and I saw him falter, caught in the liminal space between joy and despair. "We are all fools," he murmured, the mask slipping, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. "Fools for believing that laughter can shield us from the darkness." The truth of his words was a dagger, embedding itself deep within my chest, twisting with every heartbeat. In that moment, I felt the weight of the world pressing down on us, the pressure of expectations, the impositions of a society that demands we wear the masks of joy while our hearts roil in chaos. Each heartbeat echoed with the unspoken stories of pain, of dreams deferred, of lives lived in the shadow of a smile. The jester, with his painted face and tattered pride, stood at the precipice of his own despair, a mirror reflecting our shared agony. "I remember the laughter," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "but now it feels like a ghost, haunting me in the night." I could see it then, the spectre of laughter that had once filled his spirit now twisted into a tormentor, mocking him in the quiet moments. The laughter we shared felt like a betrayal, a cruel joke played on our souls, reminding us of what we had lost. The intensity of it all surged through me, like a storm breaking free from the confines of a bottle. I wanted to scream, to shake the walls alive, to remind us all that beneath the paint, beneath the laughter, there was a raw, beating heart that craved compassion. "Can we ever escape?" Marjorie asked, her voice trembling, the question laced with desperation. The jester paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. I felt the weight of her gaze, the vulnerability of her spirit laid bare. The air was thick, charged with an unspoken understanding that we were all trapped within our own cycles of despair, desperately seeking release. And as the jester began to move again, his dance transforming into a frantic struggle against the weight of his own existence, I felt the world close in around me. Each laugh, each smile was a mask, each movement a performance, yet beneath it all lay the raw, unfiltered emotion of our collective human experience, a tapestry woven with threads of joy and sorrow, absurdity and truth. In that moment, under the flickering lights of despair and hope, I realized we were all part of the same play, actors on the stage of life, grappling with our own scripts, our own roles. The jester's laughter echoed, a reminder that even in our darkest hours, we are never truly alone. The absurdity of our existence binds us together in an unbreakable dance. And as the final notes of his laughter faded into the darkness, I knew that the confrontation wasn't over. The stage was set for something far greater, a reckoning that would redefine what it meant to wear a mask in this chaotic world. In the space between breaths, in the silence that followed, the weight of our truths hung heavy, urging us to confront the shadows we so desperately sought to escape. The moon hung low, a ghostly orb suspended in the inky blackness, casting shadows that danced like specters across the cobblestones. Laughter echoed in the distance, a sound so jubilant, it felt almost criminal. But here, in the heart of the court, the laughter had a bitter edge, a knife twisted in the gut of joy. I stood there, the fool, the jester, cloaked in motley, the rags of my own existence. My heart thrummed erratically, a caged bird desperate to escape the cage of my own making. The king was not in a good mood. I could feel it in the air, charged, electric, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. His eyes were hard, slate-grey stones, flickering with madness. I remember the way his lips curled, a smile so wide it was almost a snarl. That was the moment. The moment I understood that laughter could be a weapon. How it could cut deeper than any sword, more lethal than poison. I had to make him laugh, and yet, in that feverish immediacy, I felt the noose tighten around my throat, a reminder of the risk that accompanied my role. "Tell us a tale, Jester," he bellowed, the command rumbling through the hall like thunder. The courtiers leaned in, their faces lit by flickering candles, hungry for diversion, for entertainment, unaware of the precarious balance of power hanging by a thread, a joke teetering on the edge of oblivion. I swallowed hard, my tongue thick with fear and the taste of my own impending doom. There was Eleanor, a fellow performer, who had danced amidst the court's revelry, her spirit fierce and unyielding, like a flame that refused to be snuffed out. But the instability gnawed at her, clawing at the edges of her mind, wrapping cold fingers around her heart. I saw it in the way her smile faltered, the way her laughter carried a weight, like a stone being tossed into a bottomless well. She was a siren ensnared by her own song, her voice beautiful yet haunting, echoing with the ghosts of jesters who had come before. "Eleanor, don't let them see your fear," I whispered during one of our fleeting moments alone, the others oblivious to our shared burden. "They'll feast on it like wolves." Her gaze flickered back to me, a blend of fire and vulnerability. "And what of your fear, fool? What of the darkness that gnaws at your soul?" It was an unsettling question, one that sent shivers down my spine, crawling beneath the fabric of my motley. I remember the cold sweat that clung to my skin, the whispers of doubt suffocating me. I masked mine in jest, I confessed, my voice a mere whisper. But inside, I am as fragile as glass. It was a truth that shattered in the air between us. But the king's laughter, when it came, was like thunder cracking the sky. He slapped his knee, roaring, and for a fleeting moment, I felt invincible. I was the king's fool, but the power of laughter can be a double-edged sword. In that laughter echoed the spectre of despair. I could see it in the faces of the courtiers, how they reveled in the absurd while the world outside simmered with unease. The plague was spreading. The whispers of war loomed like storm clouds. But here, within these walls, laughter was the opiate that masked the bitter truth. I remember the faces of those I had lost, fellow jesters, their laughter stolen by the gallows. Each had their own story, their own haunting melody now silenced. I turned to Eleanor, our eyes meeting for a heartbeat. "What if we can't laugh anymore?" I asked, the words spilling out in a rush, my heart pounding in rhythm with the clock that ticked away our time. She looked at me, a flicker of defiance in her gaze. "Then we become the ghosts of this court," she said, a bittersweet smile holding back tears. But I refused to be haunted. And yet, as I stood there, facing the king, the laughter hung heavy in the air, a noose tightening around our throats. I felt the weight of it, the absurdity of our existence. The jesters, the fools, the ones who danced on the edge of oblivion. "Tell us another," the king roared, urging me forward, pushing me closer to the brink. "Make us laugh, you fool." The words clawed at me, raw and desperate. Each jest was a risk, each punchline a potential execution. I took a deep breath, my pulse pounding in my ears. Once, a man had a court so miserable, he decided to hire a jester, thinking laughter might save his kingdom. The laughter surged, a wave crashing against the walls of despair, but deep within, I felt the hollow ache. I was not just a fool, I was a jester wrapped in a shroud of fear, a tightly coiled spring ready to snap. Eleanor's laughter mingled with the king's, and I could see the shadows of doubt creeping into her eyes, the glimmer of fear tangled with our mirth. I felt it, the fragility of our existence, the tension building like a taut string ready to break. The crowd roared, but behind every laugh was the spectre of death, hovering just out of sight, waiting for its moment to pounce. "Life is but a jest," I said, the words tumbling from my lips like stones in a river, each one sinking deeper into the murky depths of my own fears. The king leaned forward, the laughter dying on his lips as his eyes searched mine. "And what jest do you play, fool, when your own heart is heavy?" In that fragile moment, time warped, and I felt the weight of every jest, every laugh, every tear that had ever been shed in this court. I could see the ghosts of jesters past, their faces twisted in frozen laughter, trapped like moths in a web of their own making. I was one of them. And as I opened my mouth, the words caught in my throat, my heart racing, this was the crisis, the tipping point. Not just a jest, but a confession that could shatter the facade. The danger, the instability, it was more than just a stage, it was our very lives that dangled like marionettes over an abyss. The court held its breath, the tension palpable, a taut string vibrating beneath the weight of our shared fears. And I felt the world tilt, the laughter morphing into something darker, something that could consume us whole. Just beyond the laughter, shadows loomed, whispering secrets of despair and madness, threatening to close in. And then, the silence fell. The moon hung low in the sky, a silent witness to the chaos unfolding beneath its indifferent gaze. A flickering torch sputtered against the damp night air, casting shadows that danced in grotesque harmony with the thrumming fear that gripped the audience. Laughter echoed, sharp and brittle, breaking through the suffocating tension, a jester's melody laced with dark irony. I stood at the edge, heart pounding, as the crowd surged forward, faces alight with anticipation, mouths stretching into smiles too wide for comfort. They didn't know. I remember the way the jester's cap bobbed with each exaggerated gesture, bells chiming eerily like distant church bells tolling for the damned. He was a clown of chaos, a puppet master wielding laughter like a weapon. Beneath the paint and the rags, he was a spectre, a messenger of the reckoning that lay ahead. And they laughed. They laughed as if the sound alone could shield them from the doom creeping ever closer, lurking in the shadows of their own making. In the front row, I spotted her, Margaret, a woman cloaked in a faded gown, eyes wide with a blend of hope and misguided trust. She had come to escape her own demons, seeking laughter to fill the void left by her husband's death. I could see it in the way her lips trembled, a fragile blossom desperate to bloom in a garden teeming with thorns. I had seen that look, too many times, a flicker of joy chased by the shadow of despair. Just one good laugh, she must have thought, longing to drown her grief in the absurdity of the jester's antics. Then there was Thomas, a man with laughter stuck in his throat, like a half-formed scream. He sat behind Margaret, his hands clenched into fists, knuckles white against the drabness of his tunic. Anger simmered just beneath his surface, ready to erupt. He had lost his son to the gallows, a victim of a cruel joke played by fate. The jester's antics twisted like a knife in his gut, a reminder of the world's absurdity, where laughter came at the cost of suffering. I could feel his sorrow, an anchor pulling him deeper into darkness even as the crowd celebrated life's fleeting joys. The jester leaped into the center, a whirlwind of color and movement. He juggled torches, sparks flying, illuminating the faces around him like a brief glimpse of hope. "Who laughs and who dies?" he shouted, voice rising above the cheers, a question heavy with implications. Did they sense the madness lurking behind his glee? Did they understand that the laughter was a mask, hiding a truth too horrifying to confront? I felt it shudder through the air, a whisper of inevitability. As he tumbled and pranced, the laughter grew louder, filling the square like a thick fog. But beneath it, a shift, a tension that pulsed like a heartbeat, threatening to drown out the mirth. I caught Thomas's eye, saw the storm brewing within him, the desperate urge to silence the laughter that mocked his pain. "It's just a show," I wanted to tell him. "Just a performance." But the truth was, it was so much more. It was life, raw and unfiltered, a reflection of our darkest fears wrapped in the guise of humor. The night thickened, shadows deepening, and the jester's antics became more frenetic, more chaotic. He portrayed a king and a fool in the same breath, a twisted mirror of society. "The crown brings laughter, but the weight brings tears," he proclaimed, and the crowd erupted, unaware of how close they were to the edge of a cliff. "Who laughs and who dies?" It echoed again, a taunt, a challenge. I could feel the air shift, the collective breath of the audience hanging heavy, teetering between joy and despair. Margaret leaned forward, eyes glimmering with the thrill of the performance, her grief momentarily forgotten. But I saw the shadows creeping back, tendrils of her past winding tighter around her heart. Each laugh that escaped her lips felt like a betrayal to the memory of her lost love, a reminder that joy could never fill the emptiness left behind. I could taste her desperation, sweet and bitter like overripe fruit, intoxicating yet dangerous. And Thomas, oh, Thomas! I could see it boiling beneath his surface, the conflict raging. Should he laugh, or should he grieve? Each chuckle from the crowd sliced through him like a serrated knife. He wanted to scream, to silence the laughter that echoed the truth of his loss. The jester, blissfully unaware, continued his dance on the knife's edge, a precarious balance of joy and despair. Then came the moment that shattered everything, the punchline. And what happens when the fool becomes the king? The jester flung his arms wide, laughter spilling from his lips like blood from a fresh wound, and in that instant, the air crackled with anticipation, a pregnant pause that held its breath. I remember the way Thomas's face twisted, the anger boiling over like a pot left unattended. Enough, he roared, the word tearing through the laughter that had spiraled into a frenzy. The crowd fell silent, their joy crashing against the wall of his fury. In that moment, all eyes turned to him, the laughter stilled by the weight of his grief. The jester faltered, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, as if he had conjured something far darker than mere entertainment. Margaret was still leaning forward, breath caught in her throat, the laughter drained away, leaving only the raw ache of their shared moments. "Laughing won't bring him back," she whispered, her voice trembling, yet fierce. And in that silence, beneath the weight of their truths, I felt it, a shift, a recognition that laughter could mask pain but could never erase it. And there we stood, an audience caught between the absurdity of life and the certainty of death, a jester spinning tales that wove through our lives, binding us together in our sorrow and joy. Each heartbeat thundered in the silence that followed, a reminder that the show must go on, and perhaps it would. But the laughter, oh, the laughter had turned to something else, something far more haunting. In the heart of the night, beneath the indifferent gaze of the moon, we stood. I could feel it, the jester's gaze piercing through the facade, seeking truth amid the jest. And as the tension hung thick, I knew this was only the beginning, a loop of despair and laughter, joy and grief entwined. Who laughs and who dies? In this dance of shadows and light, perhaps we were all destined to play both roles, forever bound in the jester's audience. The air is electric, crackling with unspoken tension. In the heart of the bustling market square, a jester wobbles on the edge of sanity, raucous laughter spilling from his painted lips like a desperate plea for validation. He's caught in the eye of a storm, a swirling cyclone of faces, each bearing the weight of their own unspent dreams, unvoiced fears. Children giggle with innocent delight, their laughter a soothing balm, but lurking in the shadows are the sharp-edged faces of the nobles, their sneers threatening to cut deeper than any sword. "Look at me!" I flare, forcing a grin as wide as the gaping maw of a hungry wolf. I juggle balls of fire, flames licking at my fingertips, a dance with danger that makes my heart race. But flames can turn to ash. I remember the last time the crowd fell silent, the chill that wrapped itself around my throat like a noose. What do you want, my lords and ladies? A jest? A story? Perhaps a reflection of your own folly. Laughter ripples through the throng, but I can feel it, the weight of expectation, the hunger for something more profound than mere jokes. It sinks like a stone in my gut. The common folk, the blacksmith, the baker, oh, how they crave simple joy, a release from the drudgery of life. Yet the lords, cloaked in wealth and privilege, want a different currency. They thirst for the truth veiled in humor, ready to skewer anyone who misunderstands the gravity of their laughter. I glance at them, their eyes like daggers. Lord Alaric, his brow furrowed, finger-tapping impatiently on his jeweled hilt. Lady Isolde, elegant with a predatory gaze, poised for entertainment but ready to pounce should I falter. Each moment I stand before them, my heart pounds, an unrelenting drumbeat of despair wrapped in a veneer of merriment. Ah, the fickle beast of laughter! I declare, twirling with exaggerated grace, the bells on my cap jangling like a warning bell. It lifts you high, then drops you low. I remember how the last jester met his end on a stage not far from here, misreading the laughter of the lords who thought he mocked their valor rather than celebrating it. I shiver, the memory like ice sliding down my spine. His body swinging, the color drained from his face. It was a warning etched in the minds of all who dared to amuse the powerful. And then there's Elia, the tavern maid, her laughter like the tinkling of crystal goblets, infectious and raw. She stands at the edge of the crowd, eyes bright with anticipation, the glow of hope in a world dulled by oppression. I can't help but play to her. What do you think, my fair lady? Do you not wish for a bit of revelry? A taste of madness amidst the mundane. But her eyes flicker, uncertainty creeping in as she glances at the nobles, whose contempt hangs heavy in the air like a noxious fog. I feel it, a chasm widening between the joyous intimacy of her laughter and the cold scrutiny of the elite. I, the jester, am a bridge between worlds, yet today I teeter on the edge of oblivion. What if I misjudge? I whisper to myself, the thought clawing its way into my mind like a rat seeking shelter from the storm. With a flourish, I leap, tumbling through the air, a moment of grace suspended in time. I can almost taste the exhilaration, but the laughter from the lords falters. I land awkwardly, a jolt of pain shooting through my ankle. A fine performance. Lady Isolde's voice drips with sarcasm, her disdain palpable. I can feel Elia's hope shatter, like glass scattering across the cobblestones beneath our feet. I cradle my ankle, forcing a laugh that feels like shards of glass lodged in my throat. A noble moment, wouldn't you say? I'm merely human. The crowd's laughter swells, but I can sense the turning tide. I've stepped into the realm of ridicule. I've misread their reactions. My heart races, pounding harder, harder. Every breath, heavy with the weight of 1,000 expectations. And then it happens, a ripple of unease, a shifting in the crowd. People begin to murmur, the joyful atmosphere thickening into something dark and viscous. I catch sight of a face in the crowd, an old man with sunken eyes, his knuckles white as he clutches a crumpled hat. The laughter dies, leaving a ghostly silence in its wake. His despair mirrors my own, a reflection of the burdens we carry, unseen yet tangible. What is a jester but a mirror? A reflection of our inner chaos? I clutch my heart, feeling the mounting pressure. I remember the time when laughter came easy, I shout, searching for salvation in shared vulnerability. I remember the warmth of community, the way joy spread like wildfire. But look around. Look at the shadows encroaching. I point, desperate for connection. We all wear masks, don't we? The crowd stirs. A flicker of recognition, perhaps. But the nobles shift uneasily, their expressions darkening. This is not the jest we seek. Lord Alaric snarls, his voice slicing through the tension like a blade. You speak of shadows when the sun shines bright. I swallow hard, fear constricting my throat. I remember the stories, the jester's fate for pushing too far, for striking too deep. The laughter is a thin veneer, and beneath it lies the churning abyss of human nature, fickle and dangerous. I've danced too close to the edge, and now the ground trembles beneath my feet. The laughter that once fueled me now feels like poison, biting at my insides. I look at Elia, her eyes look back, wide, trembling. I can't bear to see her hope bleed out, nor can I risk further inflaming the wrath of the lords. Yet here I am, another moment, another chance to twist fate. What can I say to make you laugh? I plead, my voice cracking under the weight of it all. Then, with a sudden surge of adrenaline, I reach for the wildness within. I pull a ridiculous face, a blend of absurdity and tragedy, and for a heartbeat, the world holds its breath. I see it, the glimmer of surprise in their eyes, the flicker of amusement amidst the chaos. It's fleeting, fragile, but it's there, a promise of laughter still alive, waiting to be kindled. But the nobles remain, watchful and predatory, ready to pounce should I falter again. My heart races as I lose myself in the dance, spiraling deeper into the chaos, knowing full well that one wrong note could shatter everything around me. The weight of their laughter, so heavy, so relentless, threatens to crush me under its sheer force. And yet, I can't stop. I can't breathe. I'm trapped in this moment, where every heartbeat drips with danger, and every smile hides a blade. The crowd holds its breath, and I teeter on the brink of oblivion, caught between the worlds, the shadows looming ever closer. What will happen when the laughter fades? What will remain when the masks slip and reveal the truth beneath?